A loud thump echoed as footsteps hit the ground, signaling the start of an extraordinary journey. Juan Gong was sprinting headlong through the streets, rushing as if he was about to miss the most important event of his life amidst the passing crowd. This young man confidently declared his name was Ju In Gong, a name meaning main character that exuded an aura of destined greatness and ambition to become the center of the world. As he pushed open the door and entered the game shop, the blonde-haired shop owner immediately recognized the VIP customer and cheerfully called out his name. Ignoring the teasing about his name since childhood, Juan Gong only cared about his main objective and directly asked if the game had arrived yet. In his hands was the remake of the masterpiece Night Saga, something any true gamer yearned to possess right now. The game's setting unveiled a large-scale war between the human race and the demon race, with all sorts of units, from knights to mages, preparing to clash fiercely. Players could choose the side of justice, embodying the human hero named Roke, with his handsome appearance and shining, imposing armor, or choose the path of evil, becoming Zephyr Ragnaros, the second prince of the Demon King, leading a legion of monsters and bloodthirsty demonesses. Zephyr Ragnaros appeared with fiery red hair and sharp, cold eyes filled with killing intent, exuding the aura of a conqueror ready to devastate the entire world. Juan Gong confidently declared that he had cleared Night Saga over a dozen times since childhood, knowing every corner of the map and every event like the back of his hand. He was extremely excited because this was the first time this legendary game title was released in a promising VR virtual reality format. As soon as he got home, Juan Gong rushed straight into his private room where a state-of-the-art gaming machine was awaiting its owner's activation. He cherished the Night Saga game card in his hand, as if holding a priceless treasure that would soon help him dominate the world. Without a second's hesitation, the young man snapped the VR helmet onto his head, preparing for a neural connection to the virtual world. A crisp click echoed as the game card was slotted into the console slot, officially activating the startup system. Juan Gong sat proudly with his arms crossed in the chair, a smirk clearly showing the confidence of a pro gamer about to dominate the entire server. He told himself that today he would only play for about 8 hours, just a gentle warm-up to get things going. A blinding blue light flared up, engulfing his body, pulling his consciousness to soar into the digital space at dizzying speed. But when he opened his eyes, Juan Gong let out a bewildered gasp, finding himself lying under an unfamiliar wooden ceiling instead of the game lobby. Shutra sat dazed on the bed in the sun-drenched wooden tent, reassuring himself that all role-playing games started with this familiar waking-up motif. He stopped midway, mouth agape, as he sensed an abnormality in his own voice and body. Looking down at his unfamiliar hands and clothes, Shutra was extremely panicked to find himself in the guise of a white-haired, pointy-eared character he knew nothing about. His chaotic thoughts were interrupted by a gruff voice echoing from outside, scolding him as a lazy sleepyhead. The curtain was yanked open with a whoosh, and Carrick burst in with a grim expression, urging him to get up immediately for the morning schedule. Instead of fear, Shutra was extremely excited by the graphics, so realistic down to every pore, leaving Carrick bewildered, not understanding what terminology he was muttering about. He started sweating when he realized he could freely converse with NPCs, an overpowered feature the publisher had never advertised in the trailer. Carrick irritably thought his master had lost his memory, so he grumbled his name again, making Shutra hesitantly ask again to confirm the other's identity, just to be sure. Carrick held the curtain and urged Prince Shutra to hurry out, as everyone was waiting. Hearing that name, he was stunned to realize he had possessed Shutra Ignis, the 9th child of the Demon King, even though he hadn't even touched the character creation screen. Shutra raised his hand into the air, performing a skillful swipe to summon the status window, just as the newbie guide instructed. He was overjoyed to see the 3-dimensional information panel appear smoothly, confirming that the game system was working perfectly. His smile vanished as he looked at the pathetic stats, all 5s, realizing that this prince title was weaker than even ordinary soldiers. Undeterred, he switched to check the skill tab and was surprised to see 2 impressive names, Conquest and Protagonist's Aura. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, but a glimmer of hope flashed in his eyes, wondering if this was the overpowered, game-breaking buff he knew. His train of thought about a glorious future was abruptly cut short when Carrick poked his head through the curtain, grumbling, urging him to hurry up. Not daring to delay another second, Shutra quickly pulled back the curtain and stepped out, obediently following behind the orc's rock-like, protective back. As soon as he stepped out of the tent, Shutra's eyes widened completely at the overwhelming sight that hit him square in the face, making him freeze for a few seconds. Under the blazing sun, an entire mighty orc legion was lining up in formation, their overwhelming presence and thundering footsteps shaking the very ground. Shutra tremblingly asked Carrick about this atmosphere reeking of gunpowder, but the orc coldly brushed him off and ordered them to keep moving. Shutra gaped in astonishment upon hearing that the target for this mission was the Red Orcs, a name that alone reeked of danger and death. He screamed desperately in his mind because this bizarre game dared to throw a newbie onto the battlefield and cut out the basic tutorial entirely. Carrack fiercely explained the tense war situation with the Red Orc tribe, who were gathering a large-scale rebel army. Shutra was extremely bewildered to learn he had to cooperate with Chris Moonlight and Caitlyn Moonlight to suppress the rebellion with this weak body. Cold sweat ran down Shutra's spine as he realized his meager life was hanging by a thread amidst a real game of politics and war. Carrack concluded by saying they would only bring 10 soldiers for reconnaissance, making Shutra freeze completely because their numbers were too paltry compared to the enemy forces. Seeing the prince so dazed and confused today, the orc frowned suspiciously, asking if he had eaten anything strange yesterday to be behaving so strangely. Ignoring his subordinate's suspicion, Shutra swung his hand to activate the system and summoned a brightly glowing, authoritative phantom map interface. He sighed in relief when he saw the mini-map feature working perfectly, the most important survival tool to help him orient himself on the battlefield. While checking the map, Shutra was startled to discover a secret path, his eyes lighting up as he stumbled upon a juicy hidden event, perfectly befitting a protagonist. Carrack broke out in a cold sweat looking at the map, muttering an analysis that if they took the main road, it would take them an eternity to crawl there. Shutra declared coolly that he knew a shortcut and confidently walked off, leaving the orc bewildered, not understanding what had just happened. The entire orc squad marched silently through the dense forest, following the small figure of the prince who was leading with full determination. The soldiers looked at each other with suspicious, tense expressions, not understanding why they had to crawl into this remote, desolate bush instead of taking the main road. Before them was a sheer, slippery cliff face, and the soldiers began climbing and fumbling in vain, as if they had reached a dead end. Shutra panted like an ox, sweat drenched his face despite only walking a short distance, clearly showing the weakness of this body. An ancient stone gate suddenly appeared out of nowhere, emitting a dazzling aura that made Carrack and the soldiers freeze completely. The heavy door slowly opened with a creaking sound, revealing a secret passage whose location only story-grinding veterans like Shutra would know. Carrack's eyes were wide with disbelief as he looked at Shutra as if he were a monster, asking if the prince was a hidden mage to know about this strange place. Shutra's face drained of all color, and he cursed inwardly, because his pathetic level 1 health bar meant he was almost fainting just from walking, having no energy left to explain. Shutra stomped his foot on the ground, deciding to shove all the trivial matters aside and focus on waiting for the stone door to open. Boom! A blazing golden aura suddenly erupted, engulfing his weak body and lighting up the surrounding space brightly. His eyes widened, and his mouth fell open, as he couldn't understand what the hell was happening to this pathetic body. The familiar ding-ding sound echoed, and a level-up notification panel appeared right before his eyes, making him freeze completely. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, pointing at the virtual screen, unable to believe he had just leveled up simply by walking a few steps. Looking at his overall stats soaring to 7, plus the skill points, he exclaimed that this mechanism was too fictional and unbalanced. As he was reveling in his new power, he was startled by a rustling sound from behind him. Carrack grumbled, urging him not to dawdle, making Shutra hastily reply and scurry to catch up. He flashed a confident and cunning smile, determined to take on any monster in the cave because he wasn't alone. Most importantly, this formidable protagonist's aura skill would turn every deadly accident into a lucrative, life-changing opportunity for him. The group entered a dark and gloomy cave, the remnants of ancient tunnelers. As Shutra walked, he imparted knowledge about the dwarves to his subordinates, ignoring Carrack, who remained skeptical about the history of this place. As they walked, Carrack's eyes widened. Before him was a glittering treasure trove of weapons, beckoning to bloodthirsty individuals. The orc soldiers cheered as if they'd struck gold, cursing the foolish dwarves who had left behind such valuable loot. Shutra stood with his arms crossed, a superior air about him, generously ordering his subordinates to take as much as they pleased. But life wasn't a dream. He sighed bitterly as the system flashed a bright red warning that his pathetic stats weren't high enough to wield these high-grade items. If he couldn't use them, he'd sell them. He quickly calculated and decided to dump this junk into his spatial inventory. Shutra pointed at a weapon and lightly uttered the command "store" to test his operational hypothesis. Just as he predicted, the item obediently disappeared into his virtual inventory, proving that the game mechanics still functioned smoothly in reality. Before he could rejoice, the minimap suddenly displayed alarming red dots accompanied by strange noises, signaling imminent danger. Shutra was startled when he looked at the minimap, Realizing the enemy red dots were so close they triggered a red alert right behind him. He yelled, ordering the entire army to retreat immediately. But the dim-witted orc soldiers still stood bewildered, unable to process the information. Before they could understand what was happening, the space between two bewildered soldiers suddenly ripped open by an invisible, murderous energy surge. A loud explosion rang out, sending the orc flying high into the air, signaling the presence of formidable foes. The enemy's powerful footsteps crushed the ground, surrounded by the corpses of green orc soldiers who had been instantly struck down by the surprise attack. Caitlyn, commander of the Red Lightning Orc tribe, appeared with a disdainful and sarcastic expression, sneering that he had figured out the moves of these small fry. The boss waved his hand, ordering a complete massacre, inciting his red-skinned subordinates to rush in and mercilessly slaughter like mad beasts. The battlefield immediately turned into a one-sided slaughterhouse as the Red Orcs completely overwhelmed them in strength and speed, slashing and killing frantically. Shutra's soldiers were too weak to even resist, only able to stare wide-eyed as the fist of death rushed to end their lives. Shutra drew his sword, but could only grit his teeth helplessly as he watched his subordinate get cut down right before his eyes, unable to save him. Shutra sweat profusely, his mind raced, calculating whether to rush in and land a final blow to gain some meager experience. He stealthily approached from behind a red orc who was busy fighting, intending to pull a dirty sneak attack, truly befitting an opportunistic gamer. Gathering all his courage, Shutra leapt forward and swung his sword down with immense force, hoping to finish off the target in an instant. But life wasn't a dream. His cheap sword snapped in half the moment it touched the opponent's skin, making his face crumple in shock. The monster turned its head, eyes blazing with killing intent, while Shutra could only stand frozen in silence. Holding the broken hilt, his smile vanished. He ran for his life, screaming desperately as the red orc, wielding a knife, chased closely behind, determined to take the life of the brat. At that critical moment, his treacherous foot tripped on a rock, signaling an imminent faceplant. Shutra fell face first to the ground with a painful landing, looking utterly pathetic. He was utterly horrified when the system flashed a red alert. His HP bar dropped to just 1 point, reaching the brink of death. Before he could recover, the shadow of the butcher enveloped him, accompanied by a deadly roar echoing right above his head, freezing Shutra in terror. Shutra let out a desperate scream as the scythe of death was at his throat, cold sweat pouring off him like a shower from extreme fear. A large green figure rushed out to block the blow. A harsh clang of metal rang out, saving his small life by a hair's breadth as Karak timely blocked the red orc's blade. Karak turned and roared furiously, urging the useless prince to leave this death trap immediately. While Shutra was still stammering his attendant's name, the green orc warrior charged into a desperate fight with the enemy to buy time. The sparks flying from clashing weapons left Shutra speechless, staring blankly. Looking at his uncontrollably trembling hands, he tried to reassure himself that this was just a virtual game, even though the fear felt 100% real. Unable to bear the pressure, he frantically demanded to open the system menu to quit the game because the realism was beyond a gamer's endurance. The status window confirmed his identity as a Gandharva prince with the class Protagonist, but his stats were pitifully low. Shutra was stunned as he scrolled through the information tabs. It seemed he had just discovered something amiss in this system window. The skills-owned section displayed the huge words, "Not available," signaling a dark and inescapable future for the one called the Protagonist. His face went blank, and he uttered a bewildered sound, realizing he was completely empty-handed, without a single skill. Shutra stared blankly at the empty system menu. The precious logout button had vanished without a trace. Amidst the chaotic orc battlefield, he sat down on the ground with a dazed expression, realizing he was truly trapped in this living hell. From the dark cave, Caitlyn appeared powerfully, with a glowing staff, charging through the green soldiers. The Red Orc leader strained to gather a deadly purple energy surge, and a menacing incantation echoed. A colossal pillar of energy descended, sending Shutra flying into the air like a useless ragdoll before the overwhelming power. The prince's face was pale as a sheet. He stammered, denying the death that was imminent before his eyes. The shockwave tore through space, making him scream desperately as his body endured sky-piercing pain. Shutra's frail body slammed hard into the rock wall with a resounding thud, sending rock dust flying. He lay flattened on the ground, gasping for breath like a plowing ox, one eye tightly shut in pain. Before he could recover, Boss Caitlyn loomed out of the darkness, staff held menacingly in hand, determined to send his prey to the scoreboard. Caitlyn let out a savage roar, swinging his weapon down with overwhelming killing intent, intending to send his opponent to the afterlife. A piercing sound rang out, signaling that the fated moment had arrived. Shutra's HP bar plummeted to a perfect 0 out of 15, officially signaling game over for the unlucky young man. Instead of a black screen, Shutra unexpectedly found himself standing bewildered in a dark space, but his body was perfectly intact, as if he had never taken a hit. He looked around frantically, sweat pouring down, wondering what the hell was going on since he had clearly just been cut in half by that orc. Shutra's face changed color, and he gritted his teeth in panic, realizing there was a high chance he had officially logged out of this world. Suddenly, a dazzling light appeared behind him, accompanied by a strange sound, startling him and making him turn around with a bewildered expression. A voice echoed from the void, declaring that he was the destiny of this place, and ordering him to conquer all. A radiant goddess appeared, extended her powerful hand forward, and declared that he must submit and then rule this world. Shutra froze completely, his face blank, not understanding what crazy scenario was unfolding upon him at this critical moment. Shutra's eyes snapped open, looking up at the dazzling light enveloping him, feeling as if his soul had just been pulled back from the realm of death. The chaotic sounds of the battlefield began to assault his ears, signaling that the harsh reality was far from over. The entire cave area shook with the clatter of metal as the Red Orcs Legion furiously massacred the weaker orc soldiers. The Red Orcs displayed overwhelming power, trampling their opponents and brutally skewering any soldier who dared to stand in their way. Caitlyn emerged from the dust cloud with the air of a superior, his sharp gaze sweeping across the bloody battlefield his subordinates had just created. The leader sneered disdainfully at the enemy's meager numbers, wondering if they were foolish or tired of living to dare venture into the tiger's den. He roared, ordering his subordinates to kill every last one. But at that moment, an unusual surge of energy erupted from Shutra's corpse. Caitlyn's eyes widened in astonishment as he felt the mutated energy, muttering in suspicion that it was a sign of awakening power. Shutra stood tall amidst the encirclement, enveloped in a radiant golden aura, completely unharmed, leaving the boss stammering, unable to comprehend what had just happened. A system notification unexpectedly appeared before Shutra, announcing that he had just unlocked the skill, Heart's Drive, leaving the young man bewildered. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, staring at the skill notification, wondering when he had learned Heart's Drive when he hadn't even grasped what was going on. His eyes widened in extreme surprise, as if he had just seen a ghost, upon discovering the insane stats appearing before him. The title Prince of Gandharva was one thing, but the Conqueror Knight class, at level 1, prominently displayed, left him completely stunned due to its unfamiliarity. Caitlyn roared furiously, veins bulging in his neck, pointing directly at Shutra and ordering his followers to kill this threat immediately. Karak stood frozen in place, sweating profusely as he realized that the man who had just resurrected from the dead was his prince. A giant Red Orc soldier charged forward, swinging its weapon, intending to crush Shutra, who held a broken knife in his hand. Its roar echoed throughout that corner of the cave. The orc soldiers seemed injected with courage, roaring in unison as they charged forward, ready to die to protect their prince from the enemy's killing blow. Shutra flinched and took a defensive stance with his broken short sword, but his mind was still relentlessly haunted by that strange system panel. He racked his professional gamer brain, but absolutely could not recall any Conqueror Knight class existing in the original storyline. His eyes darkened with doubt, wondering why this bizarre variable had appeared in a game scenario he had cleared dozens of times. Shutra plunged his sword into the ground, activating a powerful, radiant, golden energy that enveloped his entire body. His glowing red eyes widened with determination as a familiar incantation suddenly echoed in his mind, like a dormant assassin's instinct. He roared, "Under the king's banner," creating a shockwave of light that swept through all the bewildered orc soldiers. An orc soldier was stunned, breaking out in a cold sweat as he saw his body suddenly glow and surge with unprecedented power. The system panel confirmed that the Under the King's Banner skill, level 1, had been activated to provide a comprehensive buff to allies within the designated range. The orc soldiers roared with extreme excitement, feeling an endless source of power surging through every muscle fiber, as if they were about to explode. Shutra ordered them to wipe out everything, and the orc soldiers immediately charged forward with the ferocity of unchained, bloodthirsty monsters. A golden aura-infused punch sent a red orc flying, causing it to cough up blood and be flung away like a tattered doll. Successive 1,000-pound punches rained down, crushing the enemy formation, turning the previously fierce red orcs into nothing more than punching bags. The battlefield transformed into a one-sided massacre, as the buffed soldiers tossed their enemies into the air like weeds, clearing every obstacle. The red orcs were in extreme panic, seeing their enemies suddenly buffed with unreasonable power. Their leader cried out in terror. Caitlyn broke out in a cold sweat, his face contorted as he couldn't believe the insane scenario unfolding before his eyes. The battlefield completely collapsed as the orc soldiers swept through, leaving a red orc bewildered, not understanding what had just happened. Shutra landed coolly amidst a radiant golden aura, his overwhelming presence making Caitlyn immediately realize this was the most terrifying mastermind. Caitlyn roared in despair, unleashing a barrage of glowing purple magic crystals to stop Shutra's advance at all costs. Shutra's red eyes remained unwavering. He calmly observed the attack like a professional gamer reading a boss moves. Shutra deftly dodged the attack at the last second, clearing the way for the living tank Karak to charge forward and break through the rock formation. Shutra's confident smirk appeared as he coordinated seamlessly with his guard Karak, who was brimming with fighting spirit. He shouted, ordering Karak to attack, activating all of the green orc's power, sending him charging straight at the enemy with terrifying speed. Karak swung his weapon, delivering a heaven-shattering blow accompanied by a wind-splitting roar, crushing everything in his path with pure brute strength. Caitlyn's jaw dropped in horror, watching Karak's colossal fist descend like a meteor, knowing for sure he had no escape. The Red Orc commander broke out in a cold sweat, letting out a pathetic plea for mercy before the scythe of death touched him. Karak paid no mind to the dying words, swinging his arm in a clean sweep that sent Caitlyn flying straight into the sky like a broken kite. Caitlyn's body slammed to the ground with a thud, leaving the Red Orcs stunned with fear as they saw their boss incapacitated in an instant. The remaining enemy forces broke formation and fled in disarray, while their own troops roared, ordering a relentless pursuit, leaving no one behind. A system notification unexpectedly appeared before Shutra with an enigmatic message about the general's merits being offered to the king. Immediately after, a shower of continuous level-up notifications appeared, freezing Shutra due to the enormous amount of experience he had just received, like a game hack. Shutra turned back with a forced smile and drenched in sweat, stammering, unable to understand why his level had increased so drastically. Karak stared at his hand, which was emitting a brilliant golden aura, wondering about the overwhelming power surging within his body. The green orc's eyes became more resolute and reverent than ever, as he vaguely realized who had bestowed this absolute power upon him. Karak stood tall, observing his master's small back, seemingly still reeling from what had just transpired. Shutra turned back with a bewildered expression, as he vaguely realized the true identity of the corpse he was inhabiting might be a prince. The entire orc encampment was bustling with flickering campfires, and the soldiers scurried about, handling logistics after the battle. Shutra sat in his private tent, frantically rummaging through system windows and roaring in despair because he couldn't find any damn exit game button. He broke out in a cold sweat, trying to take deep breaths to calm his exploding head, and began to analyze two possible scenarios. The first hypothesis was that he was stuck in a virtual reality game due to some serious system error and had to wait for a bug fix update. The second hypothesis sounded crazier, but was terrifyingly convincing. This wasn't a game, but a cruel reality. He began to think of manga or web novels where the protagonist transmigrates into a game world, or a similar parallel world. Everything here was too real, from the vivid setting and every detail to the fact that he could communicate fluently with NPCs like real people. And the most crucial piece of ironclad evidence to confirm this was real was that his little brother below was not obscured by any pixelated censorship boxes. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat as the thought of having to die to escape this bizarre world flashed through his mind. He quickly dismissed that high-risk suicidal thought and patted himself on the back, thinking that at least he had reincarnated as a prince born with a silver spoon, not some disgusting monster. While he was lost in his mental indulgence, Karak unexpectedly pulled back the tent flap and entered, making him jump. The orc stared at his master with a serious gaze, and the silence made the atmosphere extremely tense. It turned out the subordinate wanted to drag his master out to an open field in the dead of night for a solo match to test his skills. Karak bluntly declared he wanted to test his leader's swordsmanship to see if he was worthy of his service, making Shutra flinch. A wooden sword was thrown, and Shutra clumsily caught it, his face bewildered, not understanding what was happening. The orc held the wooden weapon in his hand, sneering as he promised to go as easy as possible on this seemingly weak prince. Hearing his subordinate's cocky tone, Shutra let out an arrogant laugh and began to roleplay as a prince to teach his follower a lesson. Without further ado, he charged in with a fierce momentum, determined to show the orc what proper etiquette was in a fair fight. Karak swung his wooden sword, cutting through the air as he lunged forward. Though he claimed he'd go easy, the force behind his strike clearly showed he intended to send his opponent to their demise immediately. Shutra smoothly dodged the attack, the sword whistling right past his face, leaving the orc stunned, unable to comprehend how the useless prince could react so quickly. Seizing the opportunity, Shutra unleashed a flurry of sword strikes, hacking wildly at his opponent. But it was no different than scratching an itch on that moving slab of meat. The finishing blow to the head echoed with a loud thud, but Carrick merely stared blankly at him, his face full of contempt and speechlessness at the 0 damage dealt. Carrick casually countered with a light blow, which, despite Shutra blocking it, still sent him flying like a ragged cloth doll, followed by a painful thud. He fell to the ground, groaning, making the orc break out in a cold sweat as he hastily asked if his master was all right, fearing he might have accidentally sent him to meet his ancestors early. Just as he was aching all over, a dazzling golden notification window appeared, signaling that he had just effortlessly learned basic sword technique level 1. Shutra stared wide-eyed into thin air, utterly bewildered, wondering when on earth he had learned a combat skill. Suddenly, his pupils contracted as a crazy hypothesis flashed through his mind, connecting all the events. He recalled the pain of being hit by Dynamic Heart and realized the overpowered hidden mechanic. If he took enough of a beating, his body would automatically learn the corresponding skill. Carrick thought the match was over and was about to suggest they go eat, but Shutra cut him off with a challenging question, leaving the orc taken aback. He stomped his foot hard on the ground with a thud, sending dust flying everywhere, signaling that the second round had truly begun. Shutra stood proudly with the wooden sword in hand, smirking as he declared that he had only just finished warming up. Without giving his opponent a chance to react, he shot forward with terrifying speed, accompanied by rapid footsteps cutting through the wind. The 2 wooden swords clashed with a loud bang, but this time Shutra smoothly blocked the attack, no longer sent flying like a sack of trash. Carrick broke out in a cold sweat, utterly shocked, while Shutra clearly felt his every movement was much smoother and more refined. He glided through the dust, wondering why he had been so clumsy earlier, even though his skill stats hadn't changed at all. Capitalizing on his momentum of excitement, Shutra unleashed a flurry of sword strikes, causing the bulky orc to hit nothing but air. No matter how powerfully he swung, he landed gracefully after dodging, took a stable stance, and exuded an overwhelming aura, completely different from before. Shutra flashed a confident and arrogant smile, realizing that everything was now completely within his control. Shutra suddenly stopped in the middle of the training match, raised his chin, and directly asked Carrick what level this bulky subordinate was at. Carrick scratched his head, recalling the number 21 from his previous check, while Shutra began to calculate the power difference between them. Looking at his current level 7 on the status window, Shutra was not discouraged at all. Instead, he smirked, confident that closing that 1-4 level gap was a trivial matter. He realized that the local inhabitants were completely ignorant of actual stats. To know their level, they had to pay mages to use intrusive spells, which was extremely troublesome. Shutra, however, was different. He held a detailed status window and the overpowered ability to allocate bonus points, a blatant cheating advantage compared to the rest of the world. Without another word, Shutra leaped high and unleashed a powerful downward slash, forcing Carrick to struggle to raise his sword to block. He shot forward like an arrow, closing in on his opponent with the arrogant smile of one who had grasped the operating principles of power. Shutra's eyes burned with ambition. He affirmed that he would become many times stronger and not stop at these mere tricks. In the dead of night, Shutra forced Carrick to retreat, confident that his rate of progress would far surpass all the small fry in this world, thanks to his exclusive system. All battle plans were already in his head, just like the familiar scenario of the Demon Realm battlefield arc in the legendary game Night Saga. The game scenario unfolded cruelly, with images of Zephyr stepping over the corpses of all his siblings to seize the Supreme Demon King's crown. Among the dozens of events leading to that outcome, the most terrifying and crucial was the mandatory event called the Day of Massacre. In the year 517 of the Demon Realm, Zephyr would personally stain his hands red with the blood of his kin to pave the way for his ambition to dominate. Shutra sat on a log, calculating, realizing he was also on the blacklist, but fortunately, it was only year 512, so there was still a chance. He was determined to use the remaining time to grind for power to surpass Zephyr, preventing the foretold death at all costs. Carrick suddenly appeared, interrupting his thoughts, wondering why the prince was sitting idly here when he had been searching everywhere. Seeing Shutra still dazed and confused, Carrick frantically asked if his master had completely forgotten about today's important meeting. Shutra was completely clueless about the schedule, innocently asking back, while Carrick impatiently urged him to move quickly, because everyone was waiting impatiently. The camp, with its fluttering banners, signaled that a formal and serious meeting was about to take place. Sitting opposite the important figures in the tent, Shutra could only break out in a cold sweat and force a strained laugh to cover up. Shutra entered the meeting room, feeling nervous and anxious. stammering a greeting when he saw the two VIP guests already sitting and enjoying tea. 7th Prince Chris Moonlight appeared with a hearty laugh, brushing aside the formalities and reminding them that they were family. 8th Princess Caitlyn Moonlight, with her sharp eyes, spoke up to confirm that this was the first time she and Shutra had officially met. Chris was extremely friendly, suggesting Shutra just call him Big Brother, making Shutra break out in a cold sweat and nod frantically under pressure. This powerful duo carried the bloodline of 4th Empress Elaine Moonlight, the renowned queen who ruled the Wolfkin tribe. In Shutra's gamer memories, these two siblings were super bosses that he had to fight tooth and nail to defeat. Despite possessing such overpowered strength, fate had decreed that Chris and Caitlyn would perish 1 year before the Day of Massacre event. The one who would massacre them was none other than the monster Zephyr, along with the Demon King's other ambitious children. That tragedy stemmed from a fatal secret related to Caitlyn Moonlight's true identity. The cruel truth was revealed. She was not the Demon King's biological child, but merely an illegitimate one. Caitlyn Moonlight fiercely questioned Shutra about unilaterally charging into battle instead of scouting as planned, making him break out in a cold sweat, as he explained that he hadn't expected the enemy to emerge from there. Before he could recover, Shutra was startled to see his beautiful older sister suddenly approach him with an extremely serious expression. Instead of unleashing a punitive strike, Caitlyn Moonlight carefully checked her youngest brother all over for any injuries, making Shutra freeze in shock. She lifted Shutra's chin, looked him straight in the eyes, and warned him that he was the weakest among his siblings, so he had to protect his pathetic life, making him only able to mumble an apology. Shutra was utterly bewildered by this excessive concern, wondering if the Demon King's children were truly as close as true siblings. Chris Moonlight also joined in with a stern expression, threatening to deal with Shutra severely if he dared to recklessly do something foolish again, forcing him to nod frantically in fear. Looking at the two formidable bosses sitting before him with genuine concern, Shutra began to question life itself, wondering if they were truly kind people. Shutra's eyes flashed with calculation. His gamer brain started working overtime to find a way to exploit this juicy situation. He recalled the overpowered characteristics of the Wolfkin tribe, with their abundant vitality allowing them to easily use aura, and conceived the idea of using his own body as a punching bag to secretly learn this skill. Deciding to seize the opportunity, Shutra proactively called Chris Moonlight Big Brother to begin his plan of grinding skills from this muscular older brother. Shutra flashed an innocent smile, pointed directly, and bluntly suggested that Chris use aura to beat him up to test his body's durability. Both Caitlyn and Chris froze for 5 seconds, their eyes wide and mouths agape, unable to understand if their younger brother had short-circuited or was tired of living. The scene abruptly shifted to the orc camp under the dazzling sunlight, where lingering echoes of bewilderment still seemed to hang in the air. A contemptuous laugh echoed throughout the Crimson Valley, signaling that a one-sided massacre was about to begin. Carrick charged into the enemy formation like a heavy tank, sending the Red Orcs flying with his overwhelming physical strength. From above, the green-skinned guardian tore through the battlefield as if on a stroll, turning the enemy formation into a chaotic mess in the blink of an eye. A powerful swing of Carrick's arm created a gust of wind that swept away all obstacles, leaving the soldiers to be helplessly blown away. The Red Orcs roared, regaining their spirits, and swung their knives, charging at the giant shadow before them, but it was like throwing eggs at a rock. Carrick grabbed 2 enemies by the neck and slammed them hard onto the ground, their pathetic groans immediately silenced by his destructive power. A desperate soldier charged in for a shoulder tackle but only heard a harmless thud, receiving in return a look of utter disdain from the dominant green orc. The Red Orc soldier broke out in a cold sweat, his pupils contracting as he realized death was imminent. Another soldier was scared out of his wits, letting out a pathetic eek as he watched his comrade being crushed. Carrick roared Karaha, unleashing a destructive blow that created pillars of crimson energy, sending the insignificant soldiers flying into the sky. The green-skinned guardian ordered a complete pursuit with a bloodthirsty expression, determined not to let any enemy escape. Carrick offered a hefty reward to whoever killed the most enemies, inciting the green orc soldiers to charge like mad beasts. The entire battlefield shook with shouts of "Hoo!" as Shutra's army swarmed the enemy, making quick work of them. Amidst the fierce battlefield, Shutra suddenly found himself bewildered, standing alone in a dark, silent space. A white-haired, unknown goddess with heterochromatic eyes appeared, radiating a dazzling aura that made onlookers hold their breath. Shutra flinched and turned around, sensing oppressive dark shadows emerging from the void behind him. 2 unfamiliar unknown entities with imposing forms appeared, causing Shutra extreme confusion as they had never existed in the Night Saga game data. Shutra turned back, bewildered, sensing the overwhelming presence of the mysterious unknown goddess right behind him. A blinding light suddenly flared up, engulfing him, and forcibly pulling him out of the mental space. Shutra's vision was completely enveloped in white, signaling that the transition back to reality was complete. He opened his eyes, staring blankly at the ceiling, realizing he was lying on a sickbed, looking dazed and confused about what had happened. Shutra clutched his head in confusion, wondering if a game character like him could even dream. Carrick suddenly thrust his large face close to check on him, making Shutra jump and scream. He fell backward from the heart-stopping scare, complaining profusely to the orc, while Carrick remained unfazed. Carrick began lecturing, grumbling about Shutra's reckless actions earlier that led to his current state. Suddenly, Shutra's body made strange noises and emitted smoke, causing the orc to stop short with a puzzled expression. The system announced that he had learned Aura Level 1, and Shutra groaned with delight as he felt an overwhelming power surging within him. Shutra explained the theory that taking hits with aura could activate latent aura, making Carrick skeptical, but still nod in agreement. The orc suddenly realized that the mutated power during the fight with the Burak tribe was supplied by Shutra, who nonchalantly took credit for it. Skipping the complaints about past hardships, Shutra immediately switched to serious mode, inquiring about the war situation while he had been fast asleep. Hearing Carrick report that the main camp had also won, Shutra was dumbfounded and asked again, as this information seemed unexpected. He wondered who was leading the main camp, as the scale of the Red Lightning Orc tribe was not something a few insignificant soldiers could handle. Carrick proudly announced the name of General Bandal, an ogre with the strength of 100 men, making Shutra jump in surprise. In Shutra's gamer memories, Bandal was a true monster with overwhelming power, whom he had greatly enjoyed using when playing as Zephyr's faction. Shutra's eyes lit up with calculation as his gamer brain started working, realizing this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He recalled the story's timeline and determined that Bandal had not yet pledged allegiance to the monster Zephyr. Shutra flashed his characteristic cunning smile, finalizing his bold intention to snatch this excellent general for his own team before Zephyr could act. Shutra mentally reviewed his entire wiki on Bandal, from his favorite gifts and preferred foods to this general's ultimate signature techniques. Even how to teach this red-skinned monster a lesson in a fair one-on-one battle was well within his grasp. With this VIP-level intelligence, Shutra was confident he could recruit Bandal before Zephyr could react. He flashed an ambitious smile, firmly stating that Bandal would become the first valuable asset in his collection. The scene shifted to Caitlyn's camp, where the atmosphere suddenly grew noisy with exclamations of astonishment at what had just transpired. Chris Moonlight and Caitlyn Moonlight gaped, unable to believe that Shutra had unlocked the basic stage of aura release after just a single day. Shutra smirked, thinking to himself that pouring all his skill points into aura was indeed a wise move to impress others without arduous grinding. He analyzed the game's meta perfectly, asserting that aura provided comprehensive physical enhancement far more effective than the flashy but practically useless heartbeat skill. Chris Moonlight broke out in a cold sweat from shock, trying to rationalize this absurd power by attributing it to Shutra's special Gandharva bloodline. After regaining his composure, Chris Moonlight turned to Shutra, asking him to redraw the tunnel map to prepare for the next operational plan. Shutra confidently stated that he possessed a fancy minimap and requested paper and a pen to demonstrate it on the spot, dazzling his comrades. The scene outside the camp remained quiet, a stark contrast to the strategic calculations boiling within the command tent. The newly drawn map was unrealistically detailed, making anyone who saw it exclaim in astonishment at its accuracy, which far surpassed the original. Chris Moonlight was thrilled, hugging Shutra and praising his genius younger brother profusely, making Shutra only able to force a wry smile, sweating profusely. Chris Moonlight gleefully devised a plan, intending to take advantage of the red bugs being wiped out to ambush the enemy from the secret tunnel system without fear of being exposed. His joy was short-lived, as Shutra had to listen seriously when his dear older brother assigned another important task. The scene shifted to a rugged mountainous region covered in dense forests, where the next fiery clashes were about to take place. Shutra, cloaked, led the orc army on a reconnaissance mission, complaining about his fate as the weak youngest having to run errands, yet maintaining a poker face. Looking at the formidable orc soldiers behind him, he felt reassured that his long efforts in grinding to accumulate reputation points had brought quality reinforcements. While marching smoothly, Shutra stopped short, his gaze sharp as he spotted two mysterious cloaked figures suddenly appearing to block their path. It turned out the two mysterious figures blocking their path were no strangers or assassins, but his older sister, Caitlyn Moonlight, and an unfamiliar woman disguised for an incognito trip. Just as Shutra opened his mouth to question this unusually secretive appearance, his beautiful older sister put a finger to her lips, mysteriously signaling silence. Caitlyn Moonlight bluntly declared that she would secretly follow to provide cover, fearing this reconnaissance mission was too dangerous for her dear younger brother. Shutra forced a wry smile, but inwardly he was sweating profusely, fully understanding that his older sister feared his incompetence would ruin things, which was why she personally came to supervise and maintain his reputation. The blonde girl accompanying her quickly introduced herself as Se-Ra, a personal aide sent to assist, with an extremely polite and professional demeanor. After sealing the deal, Caitlyn Moonlight ordered Shutra to focus on leading the troops on reconnaissance as usual, while her team would split off to provide cover from a distance to avoid detection. The objective appeared before them, a colossal cave nestled amidst rugged cliffs, believed to be the old stronghold of the dwarf tribe. The thudding footsteps echoed as Shutra led the orcs deeper into the cave, burning with fighting spirit, ready to face any danger. Contrary to expectations of a treasure, inside were only empty rooms and a few hollow chests left by the previous owners, leaving Shutra disappointed. Karak wondered about the discarded weapons outside, and both could only sigh, concluding that in the eyes of the wealthy dwarves, that pile of scrap metal was just trash not worth carrying. Shutra led the valiant orc soldiers deep into the dark tunnel, their thudding footsteps echoing, signaling an imminent encounter. Kersakark frowned, warning of trouble, and Shutra, with his keen hearing, immediately confirmed that enemies were rushing towards them from the front. The minimap showed countless glowing red dots, signaling a swarm of monsters as numerous as ants surrounding the dungeon's crossroads. Seeing the dense number of enemies displayed on the system screen, Shutra smirked, immediately guessing the identity of these minions based on their numbers. Without a hint of panic, he calmly commanded to open his inventory, to pull out the treasure he had prepared for a situation where he would be surrounded. Truly a master of strategy, he had a stunning magic potion ready, having anticipated encountering a horde in this cave. Shutra held the glowing potion in his hand, ordering Karak to tell the brothers to close their eyes on command, leaving the orc bewildered and clueless. They all strained their eyes into the pitch-black darkness at the cave entrance, the strange rustling sounds growing clearer, making the atmosphere as tense as a taut string. From the darkness, dozens of blood-red eyes simultaneously flared open, accompanied by the piercing hiss of bloodthirsty predators. A swarm of giant rock spiders with steel-hard shells surged out like a flood, baring their fangs and claws, rushing straight into Shutra's formation. These rock spiders were truly a nightmare for low-level players, always moving in swarms and possessing an extremely annoying, paralyzing venom. Shutra roared loudly, ordering all the soldiers to immediately shut their eyes tightly. As soon as he finished speaking, he swung his arm, forcefully throwing the glowing potion towards the swarm of monsters, while the orc soldiers behind him hastily covered their faces, obeying the command. The vial containing the light crystal glowed brilliantly in midair, with a crackling sound, emitting a dazzling energy about to explode. Boom! A blinding white light erupted like a rising sun deep within the cave, dispelling all darkness and searing the enemy's vision. The monsters, accustomed to living in darkness, shrieked miserably as the high-intensity light blinded and completely paralyzed them. Shutra smugly explained the game mechanic regarding the spider's weakness to light, then waved his hand, ordering a full-scale attack to wipe out the stunned monster horde. Hearing their commander's order, the entire squad of orc soldiers let out a fierce war cry and charged forward like tanks sweeping across the battlefield. An orc soldier swung his weapon, smashing the head of a writhing spider with a resounding thud, finishing off the enemy in an instant. The entire formation rushed in, making short work of the unfortunate monsters. The clang of weapons and the crisp sound of hard shells shattering echoed throughout the cave. Shutra stood proudly amidst the hazy smoke and dust, exuding the aura of a leader, while his orc subordinates began to rush forward to clear the battlefield. On the minimap interface, countless red dots appeared, signaling a massive number of enemies, like an army, hiding in the cave. He calmly swiped his hand across the virtual screen, immediately identifying the pack-hunting characteristic of these trashy rock spiders to find a way to counter them. The system immediately marked a giant red dot standing out among the minions, clearly the alpha boss commanding the monsters. Shutra swung his sword, shouting powerfully, ordering Karak to ignore the small fry and focus all damage on the boss immediately. The entire orc formation frantically swept through the small spiders, carving a bloody path for their commander and bodyguard to charge straight into the center of the enemy formation. Shutra and his loyal bodyguard Karak fiercely crossed the battlefield, leaving behind the mangled corpses of monsters to approach their main target. The colossal giant rock spider revealed its true form, standing tall like a mountain with a hideous mouth full of fangs, roaring in intimidation. Karak let out a sky-shattering war cry, then leaped high, putting all his strength into an axe strike to overwhelm his opponent. A surge of green energy exploded as the axe blade struck the monster's head, creating a shockwave that threatened to crack the entire cave. Carrick's eyes widened in astonishment as he felt the recoil numb his entire arm from that 1,000-pound strike. The monster's rock-hard shell was absurdly tough, only suffering minor scratches, leaving everyone bewildered by its durability. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, realizing his tactical error. Carrick's ordinary physical axe was utterly useless against this superior armor. He bitterly recalled its fatal weakness was fire, but unfortunately, his current magical proficiency was still a complete zero. The colossal monster suddenly shifted, closing in, making Carrick flinch as he realized danger was imminent right before him. The giant rock spider let out a savage roar, displaying its jagged fangs and dozens of bloodshot, murderous eyes in a menacing display. Carrick stood, rooted to the spot, appearing miserably small before the colossal dark shadow that was about to descend and crush everything. Shutra yelled to attack with fire, but Carrick could only frantically ask in despair where they were supposed to find fire in this damned cave. A sharp command suddenly rang out, urging Shutra to draw the sword at his hip immediately, making him turn his head in astonishment. As he drew his sword from its sheath, a divine flame erupted brilliantly, illuminating the entire cave, leaving Shutra himself utterly astonished by this power. Shutra stared wide-eyed at the sword in his hand, cold sweat pouring down as he realized this light was the genuine magic he had always yearned for. In Shutra's mind, the image of a female mage casting a skill flashed, and the word sister escaped his lips as an involuntary reflex to the newly awakened power. The enraged giant rock spider swung its razor-sharp leg down with wind-ripping speed, determined to crush the tiny prey that dared to challenge it. Shutra deftly dodged the attack, light as a feather, his blazing sword drawing powerful streaks of light that made the surrounding air scorching hot. Shutra's bloodshot eyes narrowed with cold intensity. He had cast aside all confusion and activated his slaughter mode to the highest level. The monster's attack struck the ground, creating a tremor that shook the entire cave, but unfortunately, its speed was too slow compared to his reflexes. Shutra charged straight into the death zone with a daring leap, his blazing sword swinging up, ready to unleash a powerful finishing blow. The skill Burning Blade was activated instantly, a fierce flame erupting violently, piercing through the monster's steel-hard rock armor. The infernal flame completely engulfed its target, incinerating every nook and cranny and turning the arrogant boss into a colossal living torch. Shutra stood proudly amidst the sea of flames, watching his enemy writhe in agony, proving to everyone who the true hunter was here. Shutra stood, panting amidst the remnants of the battle, with a triumphant smile, savoring the sweet aftertaste of sending the boss to its ancestors. The familiar notification sound rang out, a brilliant golden light enveloping his body, signaling the most fitting reward for the victor. Level up. He clenched his fists excitedly as he watched his stats jump to level 9, the surging power flowing through his veins making him ecstatic. Caitlyn suddenly appeared, questioning the strange light, making Shutra jump in alarm, cold sweat beginning to pour, as he had to find a way to cover up the secret of the system. Amidst the hazy smoke, Shutra quickly fabricated a story about the protection of the Gandharva tribe. When asked about his skilled combat experience, he chuckled, saying it was from reading books. But inwardly, he sneered, having grinded this boss to dust dozens of times in the game. Carrick interrupted his boasting with an urgent tone, the large orc pointing forward, signaling an extremely important discovery. Before the group appeared a colossal ancient stone gate with mysterious Gothic architecture, exuding an eerie aura deep within the cave. A rumbling sound echoed as the heavy door slowly parted, revealing a path leading into the deep darkness within, as if inviting the daring. Without hesitation, Shutra led the entire team, consisting of Carrick, Caitlyn, and Sarah, straight inside the gate, ready to sweep through the next challenge. Shutra froze for a few seconds, his eyes wide open as he recognized the familiar, high-quality item appearing right before him. A colossal magic circle shone brilliantly in the dark room, unmistakably the legendary teleportation gate that saved gamers a lot of time traversing maps. Carrick curiously asked if his boss knew what this was, making Shutra break out in a cold sweat, having to fabricate a story that he only had a hunch and knew nothing at all. He squinted, carefully examining each line of the patterns on the floor, and confidently asserted to the group that this architecture bore the distinct style of the dwarves. Gaming memories flooded back. Shutra clearly remembered being clueless about this when playing his Zephyr account, but he had encountered it a few times when playing his hero account. He approached the crystal orb on the stone pedestal, calculating in his mind that just a bit of magic power would activate the system's hidden mechanism. Shutra turned to inform his older sister Caitlyn that this was definitely a spatial gate, which utterly surprised her with his younger brother's knowledge. Sarah also spoke up, confirming that his assessment was accurate based on the design. But the difficult problem was that they didn't know where this gate led. Just as the whole team was stumped, Carrick quickly pointed to a stone tablet on the wall and reported that there were some drawings that looked like ancient script. Both Shutra and Caitlyn immediately spun around at the speed of light, focusing all their attention on the important clue the orc had just discovered. The stone tablet was covered in intricate characters. A glance was enough to tell it was ancient dwarven script, not ordinary demonic language. Carrick turned to inquire, but the 8th Princess Caitlyn immediately waved her hand, admitting that she was completely clueless about these difficult characters. It was Sira's turn to be called upon, but the assistant could only break out in a cold sweat, shaking her head in defeat before this intellectual challenge. Surprisingly, Shutra nonchalantly read aloud the words, "Teleportation Gate No. 2. Jishuka Mountain Range," leaving the two women completely stunned by the shock. He continued to add that this gate was directly connected to gate number 3, his demeanor like that of a true erudite scholar. In reality, Shutra himself was bewildered, wondering why his mouth automatically translated a strange language he had never learned. It turned out the system had given him a dirty buff. With a ding notification, he had learned the dwarven language Love 1 skill in an instant. Carrick stared at his boss with admiration, while Shutra quickly regained his dangerous expression, giving a wry smile to confirm his innate talent. Caitlyn and Sarah were still in shock, repeatedly questioning when their younger brother had secretly learned a foreign language and urging him to translate the rest. Shutra concluded the matter by pointing to the last line, simply explaining that the device would work perfectly if a little magic power was infused into it. Shutra put on an innocent face, asking his older sister to infuse some magic power into the device, but Caitlyn bluntly told him to do it himself. He scratched his head and gave a wry smile, admitting he was a novice at magic, which left his older sister no choice but to reluctantly carry the team in place of her useless younger brother. Caitlyn placed her hand on the control orb, channeling energy into it while Shutra and Carrick stood by, anticipating the results. The ancient device immediately responded, the orb glowing brightly, accompanied by a low hum, signaling that the system was online. A powerful burst of blue light erupted, beginning to project visual data into the air. A gigantic three-dimensional map appeared, meticulously recreating the area's terrain, making the whole group stare without blinking. Sira stammered, recognizing this as the Jishuka Mountain Range, the enemy's operational area, confirming the map's accuracy. Shutra pointed out their current location, and Gate No. 3, confidently asserting the existence of another secret tunnel leading directly there. He flashed a cunning smile, outlining a plan to ambush the main forces of the Red Lightning Orcs, who were stationed ahead, from behind. Caitlyn nodded, agreeing to pause here to discuss detailed tactics with Chris, preparing for a large-scale surprise attack. Who would have thought that right in the middle of the imposing encampment, a secret teleportation gate would be conspicuously located? Chris rushed over, trapping Shutra's neck in his bulging muscular chest, laughing heartily and praising his younger brother as a lucky charm, while the boy struggled, gasping for air. The 7th Prince generously declared that he would spoil his younger brother to the fullest. Just say the word, and he would take care of everything as a token of gratitude. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, waving his hands to refuse, but Chris insisted on forcing him to accept a reward, pulling out his older brother in commander status to apply pressure. Seeing his older brother threaten to sulk if he didn't receive a gift, Shutra reluctantly gave a forced smile, but his mind began to race with calculations. The young man beat around the bush, asking if he could make a slightly presumptuous request, which only piqued Chris's interest further. Without making everyone wait, Shutra looked directly into Chris and Caitlyn's eyes, and boldly asked to be taught the ultimate technique, Beast God Fist. Chris froze completely upon hearing this, his eyes wide with shock at this unexpected request from his scrawny younger brother. Shutra fully understood that with his current low level, he couldn't wield high-grade weapons, but the system would still allow him to learn unarmed combat skills. Beast God Fist was no ordinary skill. It was an S-rank secret technique of the Wolfkin royal family, possessing overwhelming power capable of crushing all enemies. Seeing his older brother remain silent, Shutra also felt nervous, telling himself that this deal was probably off, so he prepared to retreat to avoid embarrassment from his outrageous request. Unexpectedly, Chris sealed the deal with a snap, making Shutra, who was feigning resignation, gape in disbelief, his eyes and mouth wide open, unable to trust his hearing. However, the muscular older brother immediately set a precondition. He couldn't teach the family's secret techniques to outsiders. Before Shutra could feel disappointed, Chris unveiled a compensation gift that was many times more incredible. He would personally teach him how to use aura. Hearing the sacred word aura, Shutra froze completely, his face blank, as this gift was beyond imagination for a grinding gamer. Seeing his younger brother silent, Chris thought he was displeased, but Shutra immediately waved his hands frantically, drenched in sweat, affirming that he was more than satisfied. Suddenly, Chris's attitude changed. He called Shutra by name in an unusually serious tone, making the young man focus intently. The seventh prince gave a hearty laugh, proposing that from now on, he would consider Shutra a true blood brother, alongside his younger sister Caitlyn. Shutra dazedly repeated the words "younger brother," an indescribable emotion welling up in his heart at the genuine sincerity of this awesome older brother. Chris's deep blue eyes shone with determination, for to him, the words "younger brother" carried the weight of a lifelong commitment to protection. Shutra smirked triumphantly, affirming that this was an irresistible sweet deal for a pragmatic gamer like him. The historic handshake took place, Chris grasping his sworn younger brother's hand with great generosity, while Caitlyn stood behind, smiling with satisfaction. The Wolfkin siblings looked at Shutra with absolute trust, as if they had just gained a high-quality ally. Shutra made up his mind, concluding with a promise that they would go all out together to achieve the group's common goal. A crisp ding notification sounded, and Shutra was overjoyed to see the system panel confirming that an alliance had been established right before him. Golden text appeared, confirming the alliance with Chris and Caitlyn. Although the status was still normal, it was enough for him to leverage his awesome older brother's influence. Sunset descended upon the towering mountain ranges, signaling that trouble was brewing elsewhere on the map. The perspective shifted to the encampment of the Red Lightning Orc tribe, the enemy's stronghold with dozens of tents heavily guarded. The Red Orc soldiers stood guard with grim expressions, their bulging muscles ready to crush anyone who dared to approach. An Orc commander stepped out with a sinister smile. He suspected that the enemy hadn't stumbled into this place by chance, but had a clear purpose. The story unexpectedly shifted scenes to another important character, with an enigmatic narration about the beloved princess. The sixth princess, Felicia Doomblade, appeared in a pitiful state, bound by glowing magic chains in a dark room. Shutra opened his status panel to scrutinize it. His strength and agility stats were both perfectly at 21, but his reputation stat lagged behind at 17. He sat cross-legged, analyzing like an expert, bitterly realizing that at some point, his reputation stat had been nerfed, only increasing by 1 point per level instead of the usual 2. Shutra rummaged through his memories of the original game, wondering why this change had occurred, as back then, appearance and reputation were two completely separate stats. An illustration appeared, showing that appearance in the old game was merely the aesthetic appeal of male and female characters, meant to deceive others. Shutra dismissed the panel with a look of acceptance, understanding that his current reputation stat reflected his actual attractiveness and leadership ability, not just his outward appearance. Most importantly, his experience bar was almost full. Shutra was standing right at the threshold of leveling up to level 10, a crucial milestone for every gamer. He remembered the two monsters, Zephyr and Roke. In the original work, every time they reached level 10, their signature skills would be upgraded to a new level. Shutra was excitedly anticipating his own skills, getting a dirty buff, when his subordinate Karak unexpectedly poked his head into the tent and called out loudly, completely ruining his mood. Shutra turned back with a confident smile, confirming to his comrades that everything was ready to set out and clear the map. Karak shrewdly noticed that his boss was unusually cheerful, but Shutra simply denied it outright and changed the subject to avoid revealing his hand. The two brothers stepped out of the command tent, their powerful footsteps echoing on the ground amidst the camp brimming with morale. Shutra and Karak inspected the ranks of orc soldiers standing at attention, their formation neat, awaiting orders to sweep away their targets. With eyes burning with determination, Shutra shouted the order to march out, beginning the most crucial leveling campaign of his career. The army moved through towering mountain ranges, heading straight for the predetermined monster farming location. Before them was a dark cave reeking of danger, promising a trove of juicy experience points for Shutra to level up. A chaotic battle immediately erupted. Orc soldiers and wolf soldiers rushed in, mercilessly sweeping away the monsters, blocking their path. Nothing could stop the might of this alliance. They shattered every obstacle to advance deep inside the ancient stone gate. The faulty Avengers squad, consisting of Shutra, Karak, Chris Moonlight, Caitlyn Moonlight, and Sarah, entered the grand hall together with an overwhelming aura. Shutra stood, supervising two portal mages, manipulating the magic orb for a final check before opening the gate. The portal mage respectfully reported that the gate had stably connected to the Eska River branch in the Zishka mountain range, exactly as per the monster farming route. Shutra turned back, finalizing the technical matters with a serious expression, while the heavy hitters, Karak, Chris Moonlight, and Caitlyn Moonlight, were ready for battle. Chris Moonlight smirked arrogantly, praising the prestigious dwarf-made branded goods, then ordered the entire team to move immediately. The two mages poured all their power into activating the orb. A torrent of blue magical energy began to surge violently with a piercing paw sound. The orb exploded with blinding white light, accompanied by the "yu-yu" sound of space being torn apart to create a path. An oval-shaped teleportation gate appeared majestically with a "Thath-K" sound, clearly revealing the rugged, rocky terrain of the land on the other side. Shutra gaped in astonishment at this magnificent sight. Even the gruff Karak standing behind him had to stare wide-eyed. The gamer boy secretly marveled in his mind at the realism and grandeur of the real teleportation gate, which was vastly different from the in-game graphics. Caitlyn Moonlight and Chris Moonlight had gone ahead and turned back, impatiently urging him on, making Shutra snap out of his thoughts and hastily follow. As Shutra stepped out of the teleportation stream, his eyes widened in astonishment as he breathed the true battlefield atmosphere for the first time. The entire squad of heavy hitters, including Chris Moonlight, Caitlyn Moonlight, and his bodyguard Karak, simultaneously landed on the desolate land with surging momentum. Before he could fully enjoy the cool feeling, Shutra suddenly froze with a suspicious expression, as if he had just caught a whiff of danger from the surrounding space. From atop the high cliff, the group cast their gaze down into the valley where the enemy camp was stationed, massive in scale and densely packed with tents. Chris Moonlight smirked triumphantly, looking satisfied and confidently asserting that the enemy's lair was exactly where they had anticipated. Based on the camp's scale, the 7th Prince quickly estimated the enemy's troop count at around 5,000 and immediately pinpointed the logistical targets for attack. Chris Moonlight enthusiastically outlined a pincer strategy, planning for General Bandal to tank the front lines, drawing fire, while his own team would flank and burn the enemy's supply depot. While his older brother was rambling on about strategy, Shutra suddenly interrupted with a face full of concern about the chilling abnormality. Looking closely, the camp was completely deserted. All the soldiers had vanished, leaving everyone utterly bewildered about a potential trap. Shutra was startled, realizing the game's scenario had changed. A sinister laugh echoed, signaling an ominous event approaching right behind them. Shutra and Karak narrowed their eyes, looking towards the fiery horizon, where rising dust signaled a violent incident unfolding in the valley below. Chris Moonlight immediately ordered Shutra to focus his aura into his eyes to activate long-range vision, instead of standing around guessing like a novice. Without hesitation, Shutra channeled his energy, making his eyes glow with an eerie red light, activating his battlefield penetration vision skill. The sight that met his eyes was a bloody melee, where fierce Red Orcs were overwhelming a group of white-haired warriors with sheer numbers, besieging them. Caitlyn Moonlight frowned, identifying one side as the Red Orcs, but the other side was completely unfamiliar and certainly not General Bandal's main force. Shutra maintained a serious expression, analyzing the data. He noticed the scale of this battle was too small, more like an isolated purge than a war. On the ground, the clanging of metal echoed as giant orcs mercilessly swung their heavy weapons down on their opponents' heads. A white-haired dark elf warrior gritted her teeth and launched a lightning-fast counterattack, her eyes burning with determination not to yield to the monsters. The group of Shutra, Caitlyn Moonlight, and Karak froze on the cliff as Shutra blurted out, confirming the identity of the disadvantaged faction as the Dark Elves. While Caitlyn Moonlight was still astonished, Shutra finalized his assertion by pointing out their specialized Draco mounts. Chris Moonlight narrowed his eyes, observing the situation, and exclaimed in surprise upon seeing the enemy forces turning to flee. The battlefield became chaotic as the Red Orcs retreated at an incredible speed, leaving behind the question of whether their commander had fallen. Chris Moonlight was bewildered, not understanding why the battle ended so anticlimactically, while Shutra and Karak standing behind him were equally dumbfounded. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, his brain strained to analyze why the Dark Elves appeared in this god-forsaken place. The sunset cast its glow over the majestic military camp, with the eagle banner fluttering, signaling an important meeting. The group stood at attention before the giant magical projection of General Bandal, listening as he inquired about rumors of a discovered teleportation gate. Bandal's imposing face appeared clearly. He praised Chris Moonlight's army and wondered about their ability to predict the gate's location. Chris Moonlight smirked and patted Shutra's shoulder, pushing all the credit onto his younger brother, making Shutra just scratch his head and awkwardly laugh, claiming it was luck. Shutra felt unusually at ease facing Bandal, especially upon hearing the old man promise huge rewards from the Demon King's castle. The atmosphere grew tense as Bandal suddenly changed his tone, interrogating all three of them about the suspicious skirmish near the Red Orcs' camp earlier. Bandel wondered why the Dark Elves had recklessly rushed to their deaths when confronting the Red Orcs without a concrete plan. Chris Moonlight speculated that they might be reinforcements from the Demon King's castle, but were captured due to their eagerness to scout alone. The atmosphere grew heavy as Bandel announced a serious matter, making all three below strain their ears to listen. The reason for the Dark Elves' reckless attack was revealed. Their independent unit commander had been captured alive by the Red Orcs. Shutra turned curiously to ask the identity of the unfortunate commander, while Chris Moonlight was also awaiting the answer. Bandel narrowed his eyes, looking directly at Shutra through the screen, implying that the captive was a very close old acquaintance. The image of 6th Princess Felicia Doomblade appeared, full of authority, and Bandel confirmed she was Shutra's older sister. Chris Moonlight and Caitlyn Moonlight stared wide-eyed in surprise, not expecting their kin to fall into such a pathetic situation. Felicia Doomblade's profile was incredibly impressive, as she was the daughter of the 3rd Empress and the twin sister of 5th Prince Sylvan Doomblade. Shutra rummaged through his gamer memories, remembering that the Doomblade siblings were originally subordinates under 4th Princess Anastasia Necreon's faction. Shutra searched his mental database, clearly recalling that the Doomblade siblings were sworn enemies belonging to Anastasia's faction. He narrowed his eyes, suspecting Felicia of being greedy and wanting to claim all the credit herself, thus rushing to her death like an inexperienced novice. Chris turned to ask a critical question: whether those orcs knew they had just caught a big fish of royal lineage. Bandel appeared on the holographic screen, shook his head, admitting his intelligence system had not yet confirmed this crucial information. Chris finalized the hostage rescue plan, asserting that negotiations would only begin if the enemy conceded first. The 7th Prince sneered arrogantly, flatly declaring that he would never bow before monsters to beg. Bandel received orders to continue gathering intelligence and promised to ping the entire team immediately if any new developments occurred. The call ended with a crisp thunk, leaving the three immersed in a tense atmosphere before the challenging mission. Chris Moonlight broke out in a cold sweat, giving a sarcastic wry smile at the harsh truth that their esteemed older sister had become a prisoner. Caitlyn Moonlight anxiously demanded an immediate rescue raid, but Chris Moonlight knew full well that this was a hell-level mission, not an easy feat. Caitlyn Moonlight froze, her eyes wide with astonishment upon hearing her older brother's reluctance due to fear of casualties. Unable to keep her composure, she grabbed Chris Moonlight and yelled, asserting that they must save her older sister at all costs due to their blood ties. Chris Moonlight broke out in a cold sweat, speechless before his younger sister's fierce determination and reasoning. Shutra unexpectedly spoke up, interrupting the tense family argument with a serious expression. He displayed an unusually calm demeanor, seemingly waiting for the two siblings' heated tempers to cool down. Outside the camp, the elite wolf soldiers were neatly geared up, radiating killing intent as they awaited orders to deploy. Chris Moonlight regained his commander's composure, slamming his hand on the table to announce a simple battle plan to the entire group. The tactical map clearly appeared. General Bandel would act as a decoy to draw the main firepower, creating an opportunity for the special forces to flank the enemy camp from behind. Chris Moonlight took on the task of charging into the enemy formation to disrupt and tank damage, while also dividing forces for Caitlyn Moonlight and Shutra to carry out their separate missions. Shutra finalized the ultimate objective, and Chris Moonlight nodded, confirming they would burn the food stores and destroy the armory to clear a path for Felicia Doomblade's rescue. Chris Moonlight poured cold water on the entire team, bluntly stating that if the situation became too tense, they must retreat immediately. They couldn't sacrifice everyone for one person. Caitlyn Moonlight furiously retorted to her esteemed older brother, reminding him that she was also a commander, and not someone he could lecture. Shutra stood amidst the crossfire of opinions, listening to Caitlyn Moonlight yell about family affection, while Chris Moonlight coldly regarded Felicia Doomblade as a selfish burden that could jeopardize the greater good. Seeing Caitlyn Moonlight tightly grasp Chris Moonlight's hand while her older brother still evasively broke out in a cold sweat, Shutra immediately sensed something was amiss. It seemed the 7th Prince wasn't keen on this rescue mission. Shutra's mind raced, questioning what kind of conflict had occurred between these two siblings for Chris Moonlight's attitude to be so strange. The crimson night descended, enveloping the desolate mountain range, signaling that the hour for the bloody raid had arrived. A powerful footstep stomped the ground beside a monster's claw, marking the moment the Legion began to deploy its battle formation. Roars echoed through the heavens and earth, weapons were raised high, and the entire army, receiving orders for a full assault, charged forward like a storm to sweep away the enemy. The orc soldiers and wolf soldiers, brimming with murderous intent, their eyes blazing, swore to crush the Red Orcs who dared to stand in their way. Chris Moonlight stood on a high cliff with his orc subordinates, his sharp gaze observing the entire enemy camp below like a lurking predator. The Red Orcs' base still had patrol lights on. The foolish guards were completely unaware that death was at their throats. Chris Moonlight narrowed his murderous blue eyes, his gaze as sharp as a razor, locking onto the lucrative target in the valley below. A terrifying explosion tore through the night. Chris Moonlight stood proudly on the cliff, looking down at the sea of flames engulfing the enemy camp after the initial strike. The Red Orc formation immediately broke, their bodies flying in all directions amidst a hail of rocks and overwhelming firepower from the attacking forces. A furious Red Orc commander burst out of the smoke, clutching a massive battle axe, searching for the audacious individual who dared to ambush his camp. He roared, ordering a complete slaughter, his eyes burning with hatred as he scanned the battlefield for a target to vent his rage on. Shutra's system interface displayed the tactical map, clearly marking the hotspots where the two factions were clashing fiercely. Karak was eager to join the fray, but Shutra remained calm, ordering his loyal guard to wait for the correct signal before deploying. On the battlefield, one of our orc soldiers delivered a powerful uppercut, making the enemy spit blood, teeth and lips mangled on the spot. The melee escalated to its peak. The two factions charged at each other, slaughtering mercilessly, turning the place into a giant meat grinder. Our green orc soldiers charged aggressively, while the Red Orc commander stood firm amidst the smoke and dust, his face hardened. The commander's face was extremely tense, his bloodshot eyes glaring as he realized the tide of battle was slipping from his grasp. Having no other choice, he roared, ordering his entire army to retreat immediately amidst the chaotic sea of flames. From above, Chris Moonlight looked down at the blazing battlefield, his back exuding the arrogant silhouette of a predator. The seventh prince turned and signaled to the elite wolf soldiers, declaring it was time for their side to join the battle and sweep away the remaining forces. Shutra and Caitlyn Moonlight stood before the allied formation, coldly initiating the battle plan to finish off the enemy. The entire formation charged forward like a storm, led by Chris Moonlight with his powerful fist, followed by Shutra and Caitlyn Moonlight, full of vigor. Two Red Orc soldiers, their faces drained of all color, stood rooted in terror as they saw the true nightmare descending upon them. The pack of wolf soldiers tore into the enemy forces like killing machines, their sharp claws shredding the Red Orc formation in an instant. Caitlyn Moonlight, running, anxiously reminded Shutra to be careful. Her younger brother replied with full confidence before they both plunged into the eye of the storm. Shutra activated the minimap amidst the battlefield, charting a course to find the enemy's fatal weaknesses. He shouted, ordering a left turn to strike directly at the food stores. Karak and the green orc soldiers roared in enthusiastic response. Karak's eyes blazed as he roared, ordering a complete slaughter, leaving no one behind to clear the path for his master. Our forces charged in like bulldozers, sending the weak Red Orcs flying into the air, shattering the enemy formation in an instant. A cornered Red Orc desperately threw a hook punch, letting out a pathetic scream, hoping to drag Shutra down with him. Karak flinched, his eyes wide with astonishment upon seeing his master unexpectedly ambushed at close range. Quick as lightning, Shutra threw a knife, creating a red streak that embedded itself directly into the enemy's face before the punch could land. The system chimed, announcing that the level 1 throwing knife skill had been unlocked right in the middle of the cool combat, truly befitting the game's favorite child. Shutra smirked triumphantly, his eyes radiating the confidence and arrogance of a server-dominating gamer. Karak questioned the new skill, and Shutra, while running, casually boasted that he had just learned it last night, leaving his subordinates speechless. Shutra and Karak ran for their lives through the burning camp, suddenly realizing that the fire they had recklessly started was the food storage. Shutra's face paled, sweat pouring down him, as he imagined the sixth Princess Felicia Doomblade possibly being roasted alive in this sea of flames. He decisively ordered to prioritize saving her, leaving Karak bewildered, unable to understand how to find an ant in a pile of ashes. Ignoring his subordinates' confusion, Shutra, while running, summoned the system interface, activating map hack mode to scan the terrain. With the mindset of a seasoned gamer, he scanned the map, searching for blue or purple dots, the identifying marks of neutral NPCs amidst the horde of red enemies. Shutra's eyes widened, a sharp glint appearing as the radar in his mind locked onto the target's location. With the coordinates in hand, Shutra pointed the way with fierce determination. Karak, without further questions, thundered after his master. Shutra's hand roughly swept aside the curtain of a large tent, creating a dry rustling sound. He rushed inside, looking around frantically, muttering that this was definitely the right place but seeing no one. Shutra flinched and turned around upon hearing his name called. Before him stood the sixth princess, Felicia Doomblade, in flesh and blood. Felicia Doomblade was kneeling, tightly bound by glowing red magical chains, her face clearly showing shock upon seeing someone burst in. The sixth princess couldn't believe her eyes, exclaiming, "How on earth did this useless younger brother manage to find his way to this dangerous place?" Her eyes were wide open, staring intently at Shutra. Her brain seemed unable to process the sudden situation that had just occurred. Shutra offered no explanations. He quickly moved behind his older sister, his hands deftly undoing the magical chains that tightly bound his target. As he struggled to untie her, the thick-headed gamer Shutra quickly calculated that this rescue would leave Felicia owing him a massive debt of gratitude. Sensing her younger brother's resolve, Felicia silently turned her head to observe him with a probing, meaningful gaze. Successfully freed, Shutra led Felicia out, hastily urging her to hurry and rendezvous with Chris and Caitlyn's group. Hearing that those two formidable individuals had come to rescue her, Felicia stopped, questioning him incredulously, while Shutra innocently replied as if it were obvious. Her palace survival instincts kicking in, Felicia skeptically asked if there were any uninvited guests, but then she hesitated and stopped. Before he could impart his knowledge of power struggles to his younger brother, Karak rushed over frantically, interrupting their conversation with an urgent report that the enemy was closing in. Shutra looked back, urging his older sister to run quickly to escape the encirclement, while Felicia still mumbled a dazed, passive reply. Despite the urgency, Felicia frowned, wondering why this damned younger brother had suddenly changed his tone and called her sister so sweetly. As they ran for their lives, a gust of energy tore through the air, stunning Felicia while Shutra had no time to react. Realizing the imminent danger, Felicia shouted a warning to Shutra to watch out behind him, making him jump and turn his head. Before he could activate a shield, Shutra took a direct hit from an extremely powerful magic attack right in the chest, making his eyes widen in shock. He coughed up blood, clearly feeling the torrent of fire brutally incinerating his body, causing his HP bar to plummet uncontrollably. A massive explosion erupted, engulfing Shutra. Felicia could only scream his name in despair as she watched her younger brother vanish before her eyes. Flames blazed, obscuring their vision, as the Red Orc commander strode out majestically, with the overwhelming presence of a true boss. Felicia broke out in a cold sweat, her face pale with fear, as she stammered Shutra's name, seeing her only support just defeated. The monster let out a savage roar and charged straight at Felicia, intending to finish her off immediately. Felicia clicked her tongue in annoyance, steeling herself to fight to the death against the enemy, seeing the precarious situation. Suddenly, her pupils constricted intensely as she felt a terrifying pressure explode right beside her. A brilliant golden pillar of light tore through the night, stunning Felicia. This overwhelming energy completely blew away the aftershocks of the previous explosion. From within the dense smoke and dust, a figure still stood tall, making Felicia gape in astonishment and ask what the hell was happening. Firm footsteps echoed as Shutra stood firm on the ground like a god, completely unharmed after the fatal blow. He strode out proudly with a flaming bow in hand, the system constantly chiming, announcing the unlocking of magic control and fire arrow. Shutra smirked confidently, his sharp eyes seeming to say that the real game had just begun with his new toy. Without another word, he drew his bow and fired a blazing fire arrow straight at the Red Orc commander with incredible speed. Shutra laughed gleefully as he tested his new power, continuously drawing arrows, preparing for a one-sided massacre. He spammed skills like a hacker, a rain of fire arrows sweeping away the surrounding orc soldiers, making them vanish in an instant. Two unfortunate Red Orcs took the full fire combo to the face, their heads smoking black before they could even comprehend what had just happened. Shutra laughed gleefully as if he'd struck gold, shouting in delight as he confirmed the magic in his hands was the real deal. Even though the new skill was only level 1, the damage was still ridiculously high. Shutra laughed maniacally as he continued spamming skills to send another enemy to their demise. While he was pumped up, a giant block of ice suddenly erupted from the ground with a loud crash, startling Shutra and forcing him to quickly dodge. Looking at the field of sharp ice spikes that had just appeared, Shutra paused for a moment, his face full of questions about the origin of this attack. On the watchtower, a Red Orc archer was drawing an ice bow, gathering energy, his eyes locked onto the target below with intense killing intent. Shutra suddenly realized that the enemy's shot wasn't aimed at him, but at Felicia, who was rushing over, asking about the situation with a worried expression. Without hesitation, Shutra rushed forward and pushed the sixth princess away, shouting a warning for her not to approach the danger zone. Felicia fell backward, her eyes wide with shock, as she saw Shutra bravely rush in to act as a human shield for her. Shutra stood tall with his back turned, single-handedly facing the rain of ice arrows pouring down like a waterfall to protect his comrade. Shutra narrowed his eyes, focusing intently on the incoming attack, calculating a risky plan in his head. His eyes suddenly lit up with greed. Shutra excitedly shouted, declaring that this juicy item definitely had to be his. A deafening explosion rang out as the block of ice made direct impact, sending everything around it flying with terrifying destructive power. The aftershocks of the attack left behind a dense white mist, completely obscuring the impact site for a moment. As the smoke and dust gradually cleared, Shutra's faint figure appeared in the mist, still standing firm like a sturdy fortress wall. He knelt, panting, but a triumphant smirk played on his lips as the system announced the successful unlocking of the ice arrow skill, exactly as planned. While he was elated, his body suddenly stumbled. Shutra exclaimed in bewilderment as he felt himself lose his balance. He fell to the ground with a thud, only then feeling the full impact of the ice arrow deeply embedded in his chest, piercing through his protective armor. The system blared a red alert as his HP dropped to a critical 13/95, making Shutra break out in a cold sweat. Realizing his life was like a flickering candle in the wind, he gritted his teeth bitterly, cursing himself for being so foolish, having almost killed himself just for the greed of a new skill. Felicia stood frozen, looking down with a probing gaze mixed with confusion, while Shutra could only faintly call out to his sister. The sixth princess's face flushed red with embarrassment. She snapped, asking who asked him to risk his life to save her, while Shutra was still bewildered, not understanding what was happening. She walked over, scolding him relentlessly, saying he was weak but liked to show off, making Shutra break out in a cold sweat. Realizing his older sister had a terrible misunderstanding, he glanced around in a panic, sweat pouring down him like rain. Unsure how to logically explain this foolish mishap, Felicia demanded to know when he secretly learned magic, pointing straight at the orc archer who had been hung upside down on the distant watchtower. Shutra secretly admired how his badass older sister had cleanly dealt with the sneaky orc archer, leaving him dangling like a sandbag on the tower. Shutra let out a yelp as Felicia roughly pulled out the ice arrow, clearly confirming that she was deluding herself that he had sacrificed himself to protect her. He flinched, his face frozen in surprise as he felt a strong surge of mana pressing against his chest. A brilliant green light erupted in the darkness as Felicia activated advanced healing magic, putting all her effort into saving her foolish younger brother. Shutra watched in astonishment as the fatal wound on his chest closed rapidly under his older sister's powerful healing hands. The wound on his chest closed perfectly without a trace, proving that this older sister's healing skills were no joke. Shutra stared wide-eyed at his miraculous recovery, casually picking up the level 1 recovery skill from the system effortlessly. Felicia asked worriedly, but the young man accidentally blurted out something about his full HP bar, leaving his older sister bewildered, not understanding any of his gamer terminology. Before he could fix his slip of the tongue, an earth-shattering roar echoed from behind them, making both of them jump in fright. A giant red-skinned monster appeared with an overwhelming presence, roaring a display of power that made the soldiers below look tiny as ants. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, immediately recognizing it as a blood ogre, an extremely dangerous and tough mutated variant of the ogre species. Felicia's face drained of all color as she realized that to escape, they would have to get past that terrifying moving mass of flesh blocking their path. The monster charged forward like a runaway tank, making both of them run for their lives to avoid being crushed. In Shutra's mind, there was only one huge, desperate question. How the hell was he supposed to solo this terrifying boss? The blood ogre delivered an earth-shattering punch to the ground, creating a shockwave explosion that blew away the surrounding soldiers, while Shutra and Felicia narrowly dodged. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, realizing this massive boss possessed hack-like speed, completely illogical for its enormous size. Felicia nonchalantly ordered him to be a meat shield so she could cast spells, making Shutra wail tragically, knowing this plan was a death wish. Before they could finalize their plan, both were blown away like broken kites by the shockwave from the monster's slam, screaming desperately in midair. Left with no choice, Shutra gritted his teeth and accepted the task of drawing aggro for her to unleash her skills, ignoring her cluelessness about gaming terms. Running for his life, Shutra yelled for Karak to coordinate their old strategy, and the loyal orc immediately caught on. In that critical moment, he swiftly opened his virtual inventory with a decisive action, accompanied by a crisp thok sound. With a target in mind, Shutra immediately focused on the hot item, the dwarf dagger, which he was sure he was now skilled enough to use. His aura completely changed. Shutra drew the glowing dagger, his eyes sharp and resolute, ready to fight the boss to the death. Without a second's hesitation, he swung his arm and plunged the blade into the ground with wind-tearing speed, creating a piercing shriek. The dagger's plunge created an explosive surge of energy. Shutra braced himself, activating a skill to turn the tide at the last moment. Shutra roared, activating his signature skill, under the king's banner, creating a brilliant golden aura that enveloped the battlefield like a declaration of sovereignty. The buff immediately transferred to Karak, making the green orc's body glow brightly like a war god pumped with heavy-duty doping. Feeling power surge through his veins, Karak gripped his weapon with fiery eyes, ready to crush any enemy who dared to stand in his master's way. The Red Orc commander stared in astonishment, mouth agape, letting out a whoa as he witnessed the overwhelming aura suddenly erupting from his opponent. He growled warily, sweat beginning to pour as he realized the weak prey from earlier had transformed into a truly dangerous threat. Without a word, Karak charged directly at the massive commander, his aura blazing with no fear, despite being somewhat smaller in size. A fiery collision erupted as Karak threw his full weight into the attack, the clang of metal and impact of muscle creating a deafening sound that shook the entire area. The Red Orc commander roared furiously with a KRGRGRGR, enraged that a mere minion had blocked his attack and dared to fight back so fiercely. Karak, utilizing his enhanced speed and strength, swung his weapon, tearing through the air to create a deadly streak of light with a powerful Yoko sound. Karak's 1,000-pound punch slammed directly into the red giant's stomach with a heavy thud, making the massive enemy stagger from the overwhelming force. The Red Orc commander gritted his teeth, groaning in pain as the aftershocks of the blow seeped into his bones. Before he could recover, a brilliant white figure charged and sent him flying at light speed, accompanied by a sharp impact sound. Felicia shed her fear, her red eyes blazing with killing intent as she plunged into battle like a goddess of death with terrifying speed. She unleashed her full magical power into the opponent's chest, shouting a powerful cry to intimidate the giant. The massive commander couldn't take the heat, flying backward and wailing miserably as he was relentlessly pummeled. His crude feet slid across the ground with a piercing screech, completely losing his initial stable footing. He fell backward miserably, limbs flailing helplessly amidst the swirling dust he himself had created. From above, Karak descended like a living meteor, his sharp spear pointed directly at the enemy lying on the ground. Karak's eyes glowed brightly. He roared a proud finishing line, signaling the end for the defeated foe. The entire ground shook violently as Karak delivered a thunderous finishing blow, burying the Red Orc commander into the earth. The commander coughed up blood, letting out a tragic scream as his internal organs were crushed by the horrific impact. Karak gave the enemy no chance for a final word. He stomped on the Red Orc commander's stomach, splattering fresh blood and sending the boss to meet his ancestors. Amidst the battlefield strewn with corpses, Shutra emerged from the dust cloud with a cool demeanor, leaving the lifeless body of the defeated foe behind. He flashed a victorious smile, despite being drenched in sweat, proudly declaring that he had cleared the map's toughest obstacle. While basking in his triumph, a golden light suddenly enveloped his body, making Shutra utter a surprised sound in bewilderment. The system's clear chime rang out, signaling a life-changing moment that every dedicated gamer yearned for. Brilliant golden text appeared, announcing that Shutra had officially reached level 10, making him ecstatic to finally escape the life of a beginner. A powerful surge of energy flowed. The system confirmed that his signature skill, Protagonist's aura, had also been upgraded to a new level. Shutra smirked with satisfaction, his eyes glinting with the calculation of someone who knew he had just stumbled upon a great bargain. The system continued to shower him with rewards, unlocking a new passive skill, and now it was time for Shutra to excitedly unbox his hot reward, hoping for something good. The system generously bestowed the new passive skill, Battlefield's Blessing, which reduced the accuracy of all ranged weapons aimed at Shutra. He chuckled gleefully, realizing this was the game's famous Stormtrooper effect, causing enemies to miss all their shots. In Shutra's mind, he envisioned himself gracefully dodging bullets like in an action movie, without a single scratch. He confidently declared that with this overpowered buff, he had officially acquired a genuine, immortal Protagonist's aura. The ferocious Red Orcs suddenly let out savage roars, charging in a horde, intending to make short work of the survivors. Shutra frantically yelled a warning, seeing Felicia still running around bewildered while enemies closed in behind her. The sixth princess of the Dark Elves snapped out of it, whirling around with fiery, determined eyes, ready to fight the monsters to the death. Felicia loudly invoked her skill, Whirlwind of Fury, summoning a terrifying storm that swept all the Red Orcs into the air. Shutra stood transfixed in the eye of the storm, witnessing the destructive power tearing the enemy formation to shreds. He squinted, analyzing, and realized that while the terrifying power looked like magic, its true nature was completely different. The Red Orcs were scattered everywhere like autumn leaves, screaming in horror as they realized the power tormenting them was genuine spirit arts. Sixth Princess Felicia revealed her true form as a gifted spirit user, hovering elegantly in midair, proving her superior class compared to those half-baked mages. Shutra stood on the ground, looking up at his teammate, single-handedly carrying the team, watching the pink storm sweep away every obstructing enemy onto the scoreboard. The gamer's greedy nature surged. Shutra flashed a cunning, excited smile, then wondered if he could leech some experience points from that chaotic mess. Suddenly, a brilliant golden streak tore through the night sky, accompanied by a piercing shriek, signaling a new incident about to erupt on the battlefield. The orc soldiers below looked up at the sky in bewilderment, their faces blank as they saw the strange signal appear in the heat of the moment. Shutra turned to ask about the situation, only to receive a cold splash from Karak that the glaring yellow flare was their side's urgent retreat order. He immediately put two and two together, his face changing color as his intuition told him something serious had definitely happened, and someone was in grave danger. Without hesitation, Shutra acted like a decisive leader, turning to order Karak to lead all the soldiers in an immediate retreat to preserve their forces. Karak's eyes widened in stunned silence as he heard his master declare he would split from the group to rush alone into certain death to rescue his sister, Caitlyn. Shutra brushed aside Karak's intention to follow, ordering the orc to adhere to military discipline and retreat as planned, no matter how worried he was. Felicia unexpectedly emerged from the darkness, firmly declaring she would go with Shutra, leaving Karak gaping in astonishment as he called out the princess's name. The dark elf princess gracefully brushed her hair, asserting her straightforward nature of disliking debts, and thus she absolutely had to seize this opportunity to repay her benefactor. Karak froze, speechless, watching the fierce princess declare she wasn't done with those pig-like red orcs who had dared to cause trouble earlier. Understanding his master's intent, Karak shouldered his axe, accepting the retreat, and warned Shutra to stay alive, while the prince sealed the deal, promising to meet again after the task was done. The two split from the group, heading back towards the battlefield, Felicia walking and pondering whether Shutra was overthinking things, given how suspicious the retreat order was. She believed that someone of Caitlyn Moonlight's caliber couldn't possibly lose to those weaklings, but she also agreed that if everything went smoothly, they would all just return together. Felicia Doomblade leaned close to Shutra, her eyes sharp, questioning whether he was truly worried about Caitlyn Moonlight enough to disregard such danger. Shutra broke out in a sweat, trying to cover it up with the pretense of a familial bond, even though his mind was only on the alliance's benefits, leaving Felicia Doomblade to stand with her arms crossed, looking at him with suspicion. Screams echoed throughout the dilapidated camp under the night sky, signaling a blood feast about to begin with a line full of hidden meaning. The Red Orcs charged wildly like bloodthirsty wild beasts, relying on their numbers to overwhelm the weak, intending to crush them with sheer force. Felicia Doomblade glided as lightly as the wind, weaving through tons of hopelessly flailing muscles, causing the monsters to stumble repeatedly. The sixth princess's eyes were as sharp as razors, locking onto her targets, ready to send the small fry to their demise. She unleashed an explosive burst of energy, blowing away the large monsters and turning the enemy formation into a chaotic mess. Standing amidst the encirclement, Felicia Doomblade calmly struck a cool pose, facing the piercing screams of the utterly furious orcs. Two giants smashed the ground where she had just stood, but their snail's pace could only eat dust as she had already somersaulted far away. The female mage summoned a brilliant light whipsword into her hand, her confident demeanor ready to teach the barbarians a lesson they wouldn't forget. She charged forward, unleashing a sweeping attack that split the enemy formation, causing the orcs to let out a pathetic groan before instantly vanishing. The Red Orcs' faces were drained of all color, trembling like leaves as they saw Felicia, Doomblade, and Shutra standing proudly after the one-sided slaughter. Felicia Doomblade smirked with satisfaction, boasting loudly that everything was still within her grasp, while Shutra could only force a smile to let the matter pass. Caitlyn Moonlight unexpectedly turned back to question Shutra why he hadn't retreated yet, causing him to stammer out an excuse about coming to reinforce, only to realize he had become redundant. The eighth princess paused mid-stride, her sharp eyes widening in surprise, as she recognized the person standing before her. The sound of pounding footsteps echoed, making both Shutra and Felicia Doomblade look forward in confusion. Caitlyn Moonlight abandoned all decorum, rushing to embrace Felicia Doomblade, shouting her older sister's name with a joyful expression as if she had struck gold. She rubbed her head against Felicia Doomblade's chest, her eyes crinkling in a smile, expressing extreme joy at seeing her older sister still intact. Felicia Doomblade blushed furiously with embarrassment, trying to salvage her cool image by affectionately scolding her overly worried younger sister, but her arms still held tight, not letting go. Shutra watched this tearful display of affection with a mocking smile, making sarcastic remarks about the two sisters' unexpectedly close relationship. Shutra flinched when his minimap blared loudly, signaling that the red-colored enemies were swarming in like ants. The situation was changing too quickly. Without a second's hesitation, the order to retreat was given. Shutra took on the task of leading the way, carving a bloody path, while his comrades handled the rear to preserve their forces. The spatial teleportation gate activated, glowing brightly, opening a safe escape route right in the middle of the dangerous lair, illuminating the waiting orc soldiers. Firm footsteps echoed, signaling that the last survivors had stepped into the safe zone of the magic circle. The trio of Shutra, Felicia Doomblade, and Caitlyn Moonlight emerged from the glowing circle with great presence, landing safely to the welcome of the waiting orc soldiers and wolf soldiers. Caitlyn Moonlight joyfully inquired about their achievements, while Felicia Doomblade proudly admitted that her youngest brother Shutra was the ultimate MVP who strongly carried the team in this conquest. Carrick gazed intently at his master, his simple orc mind unable to comprehend how Shutra had transformed into such a dominant force so quickly. Before the celebration ended, a large, bear-like shadow loomed from behind, its deep, booming voice interrupting the sisters' celebration. Chris Moonlight, the seventh prince, revealed himself with bulging muscles and an overwhelming aura like a god of war, causing Caitlyn Moonlight to exclaim her older brother's name. Caitlyn Moonlight proudly thumped her chest, boasting about her achievement of safely escorting her older sister, Felicia Doomblade, home, without a single drop of blood lost. Felicia Doomblade maintained the calm demeanor of an elder sister, offering a polite greeting to her older brother, Chris Moonlight, after a long time apart. Chris Moonlight silently observed, his sharp, cold eyes assessing the situation without revealing any superfluous emotion on his face. The seventh prince returned the greeting with a polite yet authoritative tone, directly addressing Lady Felicia Doomblade to assert his standing among the royal families. The dim yellow light illuminated the cold rock wall, signaling that an important strategic meeting was about to take place right inside the cave. Chris Moonlight announced the good news that General Bandal's forces had also achieved a great victory because boss Yakujan, seeing his camp ablaze, fled in a panic. Shutra bewilderedly asked about the unfamiliar name, prompting Caitlyn Moonlight to immediately remind him that it was none other than Kaichan, the great chieftain of the Red Lightning tribe. Truly, he was a forgetful older brother. Felicia Doomblade wondered if the enemy had surrendered, but Chris Moonlight immediately denied it, stating that the boss was merely making a tactical retreat to gather his forces for another battle. To prevent the enemy from recovering, Chris Moonlight finalized the plan. Tomorrow, they would launch a surprise all-out attack on Kaichan's unit before they could rendezvous with Yakujan. Chris Moonlight stood tall with his arms crossed, immediately questioning why his older sister, the sixth princess, was wandering around in this remote and desolate place. Felicia Doomblade calmly fabricated a standard excuse about surveying ruins, and then being kidnapped while trying to do good deeds, which immediately reeked of fabrication. The seventh prince frowned in suspicion, asking a loaded question to see if his older sister was certain about the script she had just concocted, or if she was just bluffing. Felicia Doomblade activated her god-tier acting mode, widening her innocent eyes and asking in return if she looked like a liar. Chris Moonlight's cold blue eyes scrutinized her, as if trying to see through her soul, his animalistic intuition telling him something was off. Felicia Doomblade's red-pink eyes met his without a flicker, daring him to blink first in this psychological battle. Chris Moonlight decided to let it go. He turned and walked away, telling everyone to rest, as he didn't want to expose each other at this moment and disrupt the harmony. Felicia Doomblade maintained her cool demeanor, obediently playing the role of an understanding younger sister, thanking her older brother for his hard work. The orc soldiers and wolf soldiers gathered around a hot pot of soup to recharge their energy after the intense battle, ignoring the bosses bickering among themselves. Shutra sat, admiring his newly acquired skill panel, overjoyed at the sight of hot items like mana control and fire arrow, feeling that his grinding efforts had finally paid off. He reflected that these basic spells were still useless in actual combat. Now, only aura was the most reliable for survival. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps approaching interrupted his thoughts. Felicia Doomblade unexpectedly visited the cave in a brand new, much cooler outfit than her tattered clothes from earlier, leaving her younger brother Shutra dumbfounded, wondering what her older sister was up to. The sixth princess entered with a cold demeanor, saying nothing, making the atmosphere in the cave unusually tense and ambiguous. The click-clack of high heels echoed on the ground. Each step of his older sister seemed to mentally corner her poor younger brother. Shutra began to break out in a sweat, his face flushed and bewildered as he watched his older sister slowly approach and close in on him without a word of explanation. Felicia Doomblade's hand suddenly grabbed Shutra's shirt roughly and decisively, leaving him no time to react. The gamer was utterly shocked. His jaw dropped, about to scream, but his throat choked up due to this sudden and absurd situation. Felicia Doomblade pressed her face close to her younger brother in the charged atmosphere, delivering a blunt final demand for him to take off his clothes immediately, sending Shutra into utter panic. Shutra blushed furiously, sweating profusely, and stammered incoherently in this overly sensitive situation. Felicia Doomblade, without a word, directly reached out and grabbed her younger brother's clothes, intending to strip him bare. His older sister flashed a meaningful and alluring smile that made Shutra even more utterly confused about the fate of his virginity. It turned out to be a sharp U-turn. Felicia Doomblade only wanted to strip him to check for injuries and properly treat her younger brother. Shutra was completely frozen. His face went utterly blank, as if he'd just laid an egg, realizing he had just self-produced an 18-plus scenario in his head and then embarrassed himself. The sixth princess gently explained that the healing magic she had used earlier was only temporary first aid, not potent enough. While his older sister diligently pumped him with healing, Shutra secretly regretted his shattered illusion. The atmosphere quieted, and Felicia Doomblade suddenly wondered about the strange glowing phenomenon of Shutra's body earlier. Shutra quickly covered it up with a ridiculous excuse, saying it was just a display error that occasionally occurred. Seizing the golden opportunity, Shutra adopted a serious attitude and made a special request to his older sister. The system displayed 3 brand new skill cards: Recovery, Detoxification, and Healing, all at level 1, which had just been unlocked. Shutra smirked triumphantly, touching the virtual screen, feeling extremely satisfied with the results of his deceptive scheme. Thanks to his superb acting performance earlier with his older sister Felicia, he had snagged all 3 important support skills without spending a dime. Not resting on his laurels, Shutra immediately turned to talk to Caitlyn Moonlight to implement the next plan for the day. The 8th princess excitedly announced that today she would personally teach him the wolf tribe's ultimate technique, Beast Godfist. A brightly glowing wolf god symbol appeared, describing the Beast Godfist, the iconic martial art characteristic of lycanthropes. This was the core foundation to reach the highest realm, the main reason Shutra craved Caitlyn's personal guidance. Caitlyn Moonlight began her introductory lesson on combining internal and external aura, her hands emitting a mysterious blue energy. Following the instructions, Shutra closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to focus his entire mind to control the flow of aura around him. In an instant, his senses burst open, clearly feeling the surge of power within his body. Aura was defined as the power of life, surging powerfully through every muscle fiber. When honed to its limit, this energy would approach infinity with the power of the soul. Shutra awakened amidst the enveloping blue energy, clearly feeling the flow of power that had just been unblocked. The system immediately made a crisp ding sound, announcing that he had just unlocked the passive skill, Protagonist's Body, level 1. He spun around with a questioning look, uttering a sound full of doubt at this ridiculously named skill. Reading the description about its ability to buff maximum physical training speed, he muttered the skill's name in shock. He broke out in a cold sweat, realizing he had just stumbled upon a game-breaking skill, an overpowered ability beyond regulation. Comparing it, it was just as cool as the Supreme Magic Body and Hero's Bloodline. He was ecstatic, realizing the level-based new feature unlock mechanism was just as good as Zephyr's and Roke's signature techniques. Unable to hide his smugness, he curled his lips into a satisfied smirk, knowing his time had come and couldn't be stopped. Shutra clenched his fists excitedly, laughing like a madman, clearly feeling the thrill of being an overpowered protagonist. Caitlyn looked at him with disdain and then shouted for him to focus, startling him, making him break out in a cold sweat and profusely apologize. Both of them put the jokes aside and seriously began the introductory lesson of the renowned Beast God Fist martial art. Just trying his luck, Shutra successfully activated Beast God Fist level 1, causing white aura to envelop his hands, truly undisguised game hacking. Caitlyn was completely frozen, couldn't believe her eyes when she saw this novice perform the basic technique so ridiculously fast. Shutra looked at his glowing hands, clearly feeling the surging power, as if holding a heavy weapon, despite his bare hands. Caitlyn was about to continue teaching when a frantic wolf soldier rushed in, shouting, "Your Highness," interrupting their training session. Hearing the desperate shout signaling a major incident, both Shutra and Caitlyn were extremely tense, waiting for bad news from the battlefield. Chris appeared with a grave expression, as if attending a funeral, announcing that Kairam's entire force had vanished without a trace. The entire team, including Shutra, Caitlyn, Chris, and Felicia, gathered around the strategy table, all deeply shocked by the intelligence they had just received. Chris bitterly announced that the bastard Kairam had seen through their strategy, making both Felicia and Caitlyn tense. awaiting the next move. Shutra pointed at the topographical map, analyzing the hot intelligence from General Bandel about the two enemy flanks converging at a dead point. He asserted his prediction was spot on, his eyes flashing with determination, ready for a big gamble. Chris smirked arrogantly, declaring loudly that they would join forces with General Bandel's legion to form a pincer movement and crush the enemy. Shutra concluded the plan by stating they would fight an all-out, bloody battle, determined to wipe out the Red Thunder tribe and their main army. The group set foot in the main camp of the punitive force, where banners fluttered everywhere, and the atmosphere of war was boiling. General Bandal, a giant red ogre with muscles like cold steel, stepped out to greet 7th Prince Chris, with an overwhelming aura of authority. Chris looked at the formidable general before him, uttering a cold greeting as if already too familiar with this stubborn face. Bandel was about to offer a tearful greeting to the princesses, but was bluntly cut off by Chris, who demanded to see his soldiers immediately. Shutra looked at the formidable ogre and chuckled, realizing this was a favorite character he used to spam his mouse with in the game Night Saga. Shutra was not intimidated by the giant. He smiled and greeted Bandel as if reuniting with an old comrade in arms. Bandel remained silent, his sharp eyes scrutinizing every gesture of the insignificant prince before him. The general grabbed Shutra's hand, squeezing it hard to assert dominance, but still uttered a polite greeting filled with the scent of gunpowder. Suddenly, the image of a beautiful light goddess with a dazzling aura appeared, overwhelming his mental space. She possessed strange bi-colored eyes, one blue and one red, exuding holiness and authority that made all things bow. Right beside her was a fiery flame Valkyrie, her entire body covered in blazing red armor and an aura of destruction as if stepping out of hell. She wore a mask covering half her face, her cold blue eyes contrasting sharply with the fierce flames raging around her. The light goddess glanced indifferently, as if evaluating the one worthy of possessing her power. The fiery flame Valkyrie also gazed intently, radiating a murderous aura ready to incinerate everything. Shutra walked confidently between these two powerful entities, as if holding both heaven and hell in the palm of his hand. Shutra startled awake, cold sweat beading on his face as he escaped the terrifying pressure of the illusion. Two symbols of power representing conquest and mysterious strength appeared, signaling the bloody path to domination ahead. He sat dumbfounded on the bed in the commander's tent, bewildered and not understanding what had just happened to his mind. Shutra muttered to himself, wondering if the encounter with those two powerful entities was just a wild dream. The image of the light goddess appeared in his mind. He had definitely seen her in previous dreams, but what puzzled him most was the identity of the warrior woman in blazing red armor, radiating a murderous aura. Karak suddenly pushed open the tent flap and poked his head in, urging the prince to hurry as the entire army was about to break camp. Shutra pushed aside his jumbled thoughts and stepped out with his guard to prepare for the real campaign. The entire camp was in a frenzy, preparing logistics, with burly orc soldiers vying to carry wooden crates and provisions. Shutra's eyes became sharp and highly focused as he confirmed his combat position this time was on the left flank. The tactical formation was finalized, with Bandel holding the center, Chris Moonlight and Caitlyn Moonlight covering the right flank, and Felicia Doomblade's Dark Elf squad taking on the mobile rear guard role. Time flew by, and the battlefield sky had turned a blood red, filled with an aura of death, signaling that the decisive moment had arrived. As Shutra regained his composure, his face turned pale, and cold sweat streamed down as he realized he had been thrown straight into the crucible of battle. He stood dwarfed amidst a forest of allied orc soldiers, as numerous as ants, feeling 1,000 pounds of pressure weighing down on the shoulders of a gamer accustomed to air-conditioned rooms. The Red Orc commander on the enemy side roared, ordering his soldiers into combat positions, his eyes burning with belligerence. He bared his fangs and sneered arrogantly, loudly declaring that he would teach the allied forces a lesson they'd never forget about physical pain. Hearing the command for a full assault, hordes of green orcs and wolf cavalry charged forward like a storm, their roars echoing across the land and sky. The Red Orc Legion on the other side stood firm like an iron wall, forming a shield and armor formation, eagerly awaiting their prey to surrender. The enemy commander sneered contemptuously, mocking Shutra's side's aggression as the actions of foolish individuals tired of living. Before they could even touch the enemy's leg hair, a terrifying explosion sent the green orc soldiers flying into the sky like ragdolls, initiating the slaughter. A red orc soldier's face went bloodless, sweat pouring off him as he looked up at the giant shadow obscuring the sky. What the hell is that? The entire red orc formation stood stunned, frozen as an invisible pressure bore down, signaling the appearance of an entity beyond their comprehension. The colossal Swamp Mammoth, with tusks curved like the scythes of death, suddenly materialized from the red mist, its fiery eyes sweeping over the ant-like masses below. The orc soldier screamed in despair as he recognized the legendary monster. The Swamp Mammoth? Crash! The monster's first stomp created a terrifying energy explosion, blowing away every unlucky creature within the impact radius. The battlefield immediately turned into a living hell, as a series of consecutive explosions sent soldiers flying into the air like tattered ragdolls. The monster furiously tore up the ground, each step a death sentence crushing the flesh and bones of anyone who dared to stand in its way. Its overwhelming power sent soldiers scattering, not a single one able to withstand a single blow from this formidable boss. Shutra and Karak stood frozen amidst the blinding dust storm, witnessing the bloody slaughter and destructive power unfolding before their eyes. Shutra gritted his teeth, cold sweat pouring down as he realized he had been completely outmaneuvered by the enemy. We've been set up. Those bastards knew everything from the start. The Swamp Mammoth furiously charged through the formation, sending orc soldiers and wolf soldiers flying into the sky like cheap toys. The size of this monster far exceeded all biological norms, truly a living tank with its thick fur and deadly tusks. Its fiery red eyes flashed with a deadly light, confirming that this was a genuine monster, not a mere decorative mount. The pressure from the energy storm was so strong that it blew Shutra away, leaving him flailing in midair with a completely speechless expression. A colossal foot stomped down with immense weight, creating a thunderous sound that shook the entire battlefield. Before their ordeal was over, a legion of lizard men with bulging muscles and sharp weapons suddenly materialized from the dust and smoke. The orc soldiers turned pale, sweat pouring off them as they realized new enemies were surrounding them from all sides with overwhelming killing intent. Shutra spun around, his pupils contracting in horror as he realized the situation had escalated from difficult to hellish. The lizard men are joining too? The lizard men charged into the orc formation, slaughtering them effortlessly. Their speed and ferocity caused our side to break ranks immediately. A lizard man roared wildly and lunged straight at Shutra from above, intending to send the protagonist back to the city to recover with a fatal blow. A lizard man suddenly swooped down, delivering a fatal slash intended to send Shutra to his ancestors while he was still bewildered and hadn't processed the situation. Karak let out an earth-shattering roar, pulling Shutra's mind back to reality with a warning that just one wrong move would wipe out the entire team permanently. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, his pupils contracting as he realized his life was hanging by a thread, and this was a bloody battlefield, not the virtual game he used to play. Chris Moonlight plunged into the enemy encirclement like a beast, striking down the obstructing Red Orcs with the overwhelming physical strength of the wolf soldiers. The seventh prince gritted his teeth bitterly, realizing they had been led by the nose and toyed with like mice by the enemy from the very beginning of the battle. Felicia Doomblade kept a cool head amidst the inferno, decisively suggesting an immediate retreat to preserve their forces, which stunned Chris Moonlight, who was unwilling to accept it. The Dark Elf analyzed the situation sharply, asserting that if they stubbornly pushed on, the only outcome would be the complete annihilation of the entire legion, leaving no one behind. Felicia Doomblade pressured Chris Moonlight to make a life-or-death decision on the spot, forcing him to cast aside his proud ego to save the lives of his fellow soldiers. The commander's resounding shout startled the allied orc soldiers, who bewilderedly awaited the final order to escape this living hell. Chris Moonlight stood high above, giving a stern command, arranging a rearguard mage formation to block the path so the main army could quickly and safely retreat from the deadly encirclement. Chris Moonlight roared a life-or-death command, obliging the entire army to return alive at all costs, not to perish in foreign lands. The Legion's temporary base was nestled deep within the canyon, its flickering lights in the silent night signaling a lull before the storm. Inside the medical tent, female Dark Elf mages were pouring all their efforts into using green magic to heal the orc casualties who had just narrowly escaped death. The atmosphere in the command tent grew heavy as Chris Moonlight admitted his fatal mistake of being overly complacent and underestimating the enemy from the start. The seventh prince turned to Karak with a resigned expression, asserting that the only choice now was a full retreat, or to shamelessly request reinforcements from the Demon King's castle. Chris Moonlight gritted his teeth, suppressing his proud ego, and declared that he could not drag his comrades to their deaths, merely for his personal desire for fleeting glory. Felicia Doomblade suddenly raised her hand, cutting through the gloomy atmosphere, her eyes lighting up as a bold idea struck her. Instead of retreating empty-handed, the sixth princess revealed the real reason she was in this remote area was to explore the ancient ruins located right on the edge of the Jishuka mountain range. Shutra secretly assessed that while Felicia Doomblade was an excellent mage, her skill set leaned more towards archaeological research than bloody combat. The Dark Elf slammed her hand down on the map with a thud, marking the new target location, forcing everyone to focus their attention on this game-changing plan. Felicia Doomblade began her presentation about a 1500-year-old ancient dungeon called the Lair of the Earth Dragon Enkidu, located right within this mountain range. According to the game's lore, Enkidu was a dragon born from lava and had hired guardians to protect its treasure. The sixth princess revealed that the guardians were actually the dwarves, and Enkidu had forced them to craft weapons, making Shutra curious enough to ask again. That hot item was the thunder-forging anvil, a strategic weapon capable of controlling hybrid monsters and casting legion-level area of effect magic. She slammed her hand down on the table with a thud to emphasize the gravity of the matter. Felicia Doomblade declared with certainty that to win this gamble, the only way was to find that anvil. She turned to Bandel, asking if he knew the exact location of the anvil, as that was her primary reason for coming here. Chris Moonlight sighed in exasperation, pouring cold water on his younger sister's enthusiasm by concluding that such vague information wouldn't solve anything. The seventh prince adamantly refused to risk his comrades' lives to hunt for treasure when the enemy could ambush them at any moment. Felicia Doomblade gritted her teeth in frustration at her older brother's reluctance, deep down still convinced that the thunder-forging anvil was definitely nearby. Shutra suddenly sprang from his seat, causing the atmosphere in the room to tense, interrupting everyone's thoughts with a serious demeanor. He rummaged through his memories from his gamer days, recalling the moment he transformed into the hero Roke and personally witnessed the thunder-forging anvil in the game. Shutra began to bluff with a credible expression, boasting that he found this important clue while studying the dwarven language. Shutra continued his critical psychological attack, turning to look directly at his opponent and affirming that the biggest reason was his complete trust in Felicia Doomblade. Felicia Doomblade froze completely, her eyes wide with surprise, not expecting her younger brother to make such a powerful public flirtatious move. While his elder sister was still basking in emotion, Shutra gleefully calculated in his head that gaining some extra favor points was also a profitable move. Chris Moonlight kept a cool head, brushing aside matters of sentiment, as he didn't want to waste time, making Shutra sweat profusely at his elder brother's stubbornness. Having no other choice, Shutra had to pull out the Gandharva patronage card, boasting that they also had a similar legend about this location on the map. He pointed decisively at the map, firmly declaring that the entrance was nearby and was ready to take full responsibility if it wasn't found. Shutra concluded with fiery eyes, pleading for one last trust to play an all-in, do-or-die gamble with fate. Shutra's entire squad rode their phantom horses, flying at breakneck speed, leaving eerie greenish light trails behind them. Even though he had managed to get everyone to follow, Shutra was still sweating profusely, extremely worried because the upcoming act would be much tougher. Karak, fearing his weak master would fall flat on his face, reminded him frantically, but he didn't know Shutra was smirking inwardly, because he had ridden this very type of mount until his butt was sore back when he played a Zephyr. The young man rode his horse while opening the minimap to check the route. It's true that with full support tools, one feels much more confident going anywhere. The system reported that they were only an hour away from the rendezvous point. With this fancy GPS, finding the ruins would be as easy as pie. The difficult problem now was how to lead the group to the correct coordinates naturally, without being suspected of map hacking or knowing the answer beforehand. Shutra frowned, racking his brain until smoke seemed to rise from his head, trying to concoct a plausible scenario to fool his suspicious elder sister, Felicia Doomblade. Time was running out. He could only click his tongue and leave it to fate, hoping his silver tongue and protagonist's aura would carry the team at the last minute. The young man bluffed like a god about terrain rules and dungeon map comparisons, spewing profound knowledge that made everyone who listened dizzy. Caitlyn, Moonlight, and Karak froze completely, their faces blank, unsure whether to admire his supreme intellect or be confused by this jumble of theories. Shutra sweated profusely, seeing the crowd bewildered by his bluff, inwardly praying they wouldn't question him further so he could keep his life. Felicia Doomblade unexpectedly nodded, accepting that empty theory, and signaled the entire group to continue moving under her younger brother's guidance. The young man Shutra was overjoyed at having tricked his cunning elder sister and immediately regained his fake confident demeanor to urge everyone forward. Caitlyn, Moonlight, though still half skeptical, could only let out a cold snort and sullenly followed behind with an unamused expression. Karak and Caitlyn Moonlight were dumbfounded as they followed the prince's instructions, but found nothing but gloomy air and dense vegetation in front of them. Before the group was a towering, sheer cliff, a complete dead end, with not even a crack to squeeze through, let alone an entrance. The orc guard was utterly bewildered by his master's navigation skills, but Shutra only responded with a sly, meaningful smile. Shutra completely stunned Karak by flatly declaring, "Who said we needed to enter through the main door?" He turned and designated Caitlyn Moonlight as a human excavator, asking her to unleash an attack to break the obstacle in front of them, which startled her. While the wolf warrior woman reluctantly prepared her attack, Felicia Doomblade behind them seemed to have vaguely guessed her eccentric younger brother's crazy intention. Felicia Doomblade looked up at the towering, sheer cliff, skeptically asking her eccentric younger brother if the legendary Thunder Forge truly lay within this pile of rocks. Shutra flashed a cunning, merchant-like smile, firmly asserting that, according to his calculations, breaking through here would allow them to bypass the troublesome guardians inside. He casually pointed, suggesting that Caitlyn Moonlight use her bare hands to punch through the mountain, which made Felicia Doomblade furiously call him an idiot to his face, asking how a flesh fist could contend with solid rock. The dark elf elder sister crossed her arms, sarcastically remarking that Caitlyn wasn't a siege weapon, while Shutra scratched his head, feigning innocence, and asked in return how they were supposed to break it then. Successfully provoked, Felicia Doomblade's hand began to gather an immense blue magical energy, swirling like a small storm compressed in her palm. Felicia Doomblade smirked with fiery eyes, declaring that all relic explorers had a minor in demolition, then unleashed a powerful strike at the cliff face. The destructive energy stream shot straight at the target with terrifying force, making the surrounding air violently tremble as if it wanted to tear space apart. The steel-hard rock surface couldn't withstand the heat, beginning to crack into large fragments under the immense pressure of high-level magic. An earth-shattering explosion echoed, accompanied by a dazzling pillar of light, blowing away all obstacles and turning the sturdy cliff into rubble. As the smoke and dust cleared, a newly opened path was revealed. Felicia Doomblade stood striking a cool pose after the destruction, while Shutra and his disciples behind her could only stare wide-eyed at the result. Felicia Doomblade sweated profusely, her mouth stammering in disbelief at the magnificent sight within the newly opened passage. Felicia Doomblade turned back, questioning him urgently with an utterly bewildered expression. She hadn't expected her useless younger brother to find the real deal so easily. The entire team entered the Grand Hall. Shutra led the way, explaining that the dome was the final protective seal for the divine anvil within. Bandle's hands itched, intending to use brute force to smash the protective cage, but Shutra stopped him immediately, fearing he would damage the precious item inside. Felicia Doomblade frowned in thought, firmly asserting that there must be some secret mechanism to unlock it civilly instead of using brute force. She glanced at the towering guardian statues, while Chris Moonlight quietly stood observing the situation from behind. Shutra, with sharp eyes, pointed out the anomaly of the stones. Among the 9 statues, only 3 held weapons, while 6 stood empty-handed. Caitlyn Moonlight quickly guessed that they needed to equip the remaining ones with weapons, but her elder sister Felicia still doubted the simplicity of this trap. The difficult problem emerged. The requirement was for genuine dwarven items, but where could they find 6 rare and hard-to-find swords right now? Shutra casually pulled exactly 6 dwarven swords from his inventory, making Felicia Doomblade gape at his absurd hidden wealth. Shutra smirked, congratulating himself on his extreme luck, as his habit of hoarding useless junk weapons had saved them from a clear defeat. In a flashback, he had explained to Karak that he had just casually picked up some spare items in the previous tunnel, just to be safe. Back in reality, Shutra both teased Karak about not being too smart, and mocked the weak orc as he took the heavy pile of swords. One guardian statue emitted a loud sound as its stone hand firmly grasped the newly equipped sword. A series of other statues in the Grand Hall also received weapons. In turn, the crisp sound of stone joints clashing echoed throughout the space. The stone statue's eyes glowed with a deadly blue light, accompanied by heavy thudding sounds, signaling that the defense mechanism had accepted the key. The entire cavern shook violently. An immense stream of energy pressed down from above, making Shutra's entire group look up in tension. The colossal energy dome slowly split in two. A dazzling light swept away the darkness in the Grand Hall. Karak, Caitlyn, Felicia, Shutra, and Sira stood frozen, bathed in the ethereal blue light, as the final protective seal collapsed. Shutra's eyes were wide open, his voice trembling with emotion, as he witnessed the legendary treasure appear before his very eyes. The entire group stood stunned before the legendary forge anvil, which radiated a terrifying pressure, true to its name, the thunder-forged anvil. Felicia solemnly explained that according to ancient records, there was still one final procedure to activate the forge, making Shutra ask again, bewildered. Felicia Doomblade immediately took on a commanding posture, instructing Shutra and Karak to hold their positions, while the others spread out towards 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. The plan was to inject mana into the disc clockwise, starting from Felicia's position and gradually increasing the energy amount. The formation was in position around the anvil. Felicia shouted, asking everyone to concentrate fully to begin the ritual. A crackling sound echoed as Felicia pioneered the energy activation. A surging blue current enveloped her body. All 5 people simultaneously discharged mana, forming a brilliant circle of lightning, directly connected to the anvil in the center. Seeing the flow wasn't strong enough, Felicia shouted, demanding Shutra increase his output, and he immediately confirmed. Felicia maintained the current, while reminding the group to stay stable, and absolutely not let their guard down. Shutra and Felicia poured all their mana into it, and the energy burst forth violently, accompanied by roars echoing throughout the cave. A dry cracking sound echoed as the stone anvil began to crack, reacting violently to the surge of energy just pumped into it. Shutra tensed all his muscles, his hands unleashing intricate blue lightning bolts, determined to activate this hot item. He gritted his teeth, eyes wide, focusing on controlling the current that shrieked piercingly, sending shivers down one's spine. Boom! A colossal pillar of lightning struck the target from above, creating an earth-shattering energy explosion on the spot. Thick smoke and dust billowed up, and Shutra stood dumbfounded, not understanding what the hell had just happened after that terrifying impact. His eyes widened as he saw ancient dwarf warrior spirits with thick beards suddenly materialize from the void, looking extremely majestic. Thud! A colossal monster foot stomped heavily on the ground, making the entire cave shake as if it were about to collapse. All the troops below, from the orcs to the dark elves, simultaneously cheered in excitement, as if they had just won the lottery. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, his face pale as he stammered a few words at the chaotic scene of his subordinates below. Before he could compose himself, he flinched again upon hearing a strange sound coming from the cave ceiling above. Shutra stood dwarfed amidst the encirclement of ancient dwarf warrior spirits, who were staring at him with stern expressions. He looked up, his face blank with shock, as he witnessed an absurd scene unfolding right above his head. A colossal black dragon spread its wings, eclipsing the entire crimson sky, exuding an overwhelming pressure that made even the spirits look up in terror. The monster revealed itself with scales cracked like molten lava, bearing the mission of guarding the nest of the great Enkidu. Shutra stared blankly into the void, his mind drawn into the message about the life and death boundary between the human realm and the demon realm. The dragon's mouth, full of sharp teeth, opened wide like a cosmic black hole, roaring to declare its authoritative role as the gatekeeper. As the illusion ended, Shutra collapsed onto the cold floor, his limbs limp as if he had lost his soul after the immense mental shock. He sprang up, panting heavily, sweat pouring down him, his wide eyes still etched with the extreme terror from the recent vision. The image of the black dragon with its destructive power still haunted his mind, making him certain that it was the legendary earth dragon Enkidu. Shutra sat on the ground, looking up at the mysterious figure standing tall before him and asking if they had seen something similar. Felicia stepped out with a dazed expression, her voice trembling as she described the image of the black dragon with lava flowing in its veins that she had just witnessed. Shutra turned to see Karak also breaking out in a cold sweat from fear, and he immediately confirmed that everyone here had experienced the same illusion. Felicia nodded, confirming his suspicion, while Shutra still couldn't decipher the true meaning behind this omen. Felicia quickly regained her composure, her eyes sharpening as she decided to cast aside her fear and focus on the main objective. She turned and walked towards the glowing colossal anvil, declaring confidently that once it was activated, all mysteries would be revealed. Her footsteps halted, and Felicia stood tall before the ancient forging altar, mentally preparing to awaken the dormant power. The moment her slender hand touched the cold stone surface, ominous black energy immediately shot out threateningly. A violent pillar of purple energy erupted, engulfing Felicia, and the terrifying pressure made Shutra and her subordinates watch in horror. The raging magical power screamed as if it wanted to tear space apart. Felicia was caught in the eye of the storm and had to brace herself against the backlash. Felicia's face contorted in extreme pain, blood streaming from her nose down her chin, but she gritted her teeth, determined not to let go of the forging altar. Seeing Felicia grimacing in pain, Shutra couldn't just stand by. He rushed straight into the dangerous zone, shouting his sister's name. Ignoring Felicia's weak protests, Shutra's hand decisively reached out, determined to pull his sister out of this deadly trap. The moment Shutra touched Felicia, the backlash of dark energy immediately jolted him, and both siblings were stunned by the violent reaction. Boom! A colossal pillar of purple energy exploded, engulfing both siblings, throwing everything around them and terrifying the subordinates outside. Outside the battle, Karak and Sarah could only gape in horror, screaming their master's name in utter helplessness as they saw them engulfed. Shutra let out a desperate cry as the raging power invaded his body, feeling as if every fiber of his flesh was being torn apart. An authoritative voice echoed in his mind, asserting that this was conquest, a brutal trial from the mana of the Earth Dragon Enkidu for uninvited guests. Amidst the deep purple void, Shutra drifted aimlessly, his mind beginning to absorb the concept of conquest that was invading his soul. Energy erupted violently around the forging altar with a space-shaking roar, affirming the truth that conquest was an act of absolute domination. Eerie black shadows began to rise from the ground, surrounding Carrick and Sarah, making the two guardians break out in a cold sweat under the immense pressure. Amidst the lingering thick smoke and dust after the explosion, Shutra knelt on the cold stone floor while Carrick and Sarah could only stand rooted, staring at their master's back. He panted heavily, his right hand braced on the ground for support while his left gripped a pitch-black hammer that emanated dark energy, swirling like living ink. Shutra slowly lifted his head, his left eye glowing with an eerie, threatening purple light, making his comrades' anxious calls seem to fade away. The scene shifted to a desolate canyon under a red moon. The Red Orcs' encampment stood tall, with dozens of tents and flickering torches, carefully guarded. At the foot of the sheer cliff, the Red Orc soldiers looked up, awaiting news from the scout clinging to the top of the abyss like a lizard. The Orc scout eagerly climbed over the rocky edge, a smug grin on his face as he discovered the whereabouts of the juicy prey they were hunting. The entire encampment buzzed with mocking laughter. They were certain that those pathetic rats were foolish to think they could outwit the eyes and ears of the Red Thunder tribe. A soldier knelt on the ground, reporting the situation with a bloodthirsty tone, eagerly requesting immediate attack orders to crush the enemy. Great Chieftain Yakuzan appeared imposingly with his white hair and majestic beard, exuding the overwhelming aura of a true ruler that made his subordinates bow their heads. Yakuzan narrowed his eyes, gazing into the distance with a cruel expression, coldly ordering his entire army to prepare for an impending bloody massacre. Great Chieftain Yakuzan flashed a sinister smile, ordering his entire army to advance and sweep away the last survivors like trash. The Red Orc soldiers marched forward thunderously, mobile masses of flesh beginning to pour into the valley with an intimidating momentum. Two allied Orc soldiers looked up at the sky, their faces drained of color as they realized the calamity descending upon them. A colossal fireball tore through the night, hurtling straight towards the allied formation, signaling the start of a massacre. An earth-shattering explosion flung the green-skinned Orc soldiers into the air, turning the defensive formation into shattered debris. Fire and rubble scattered everywhere. A desperate soldier raised his hand to block the attack in vain against the destructive power of the bombardment. The enemy's Swamp Mammoths charged wildly, ramming through all obstacles, tearing up the battlefield in a chaotic sea of fire. Desperate screams echoed everywhere. The Allied soldiers completely broke formation and fled in utter panic. Chris Moonlight stood frozen amidst the hail of bombs and bullets, aghast as he watched his soldiers being mercilessly crushed. The seventh prince broke out in a cold sweat, bitterly gritting his teeth, as he realized that, without Caitlyn and Felicia here, their side would surely be completely annihilated. Yakuzan stood proudly on the high cliff, looking down at the sea of fire consuming the Allied formation below. The old man sneered contemptuously, scoffing that those foolish demons had sought their own demise by daring to confront him. He ordered the Orc mages below to quickly unleash their finishing blows to clear the battlefield. The mage's hand suddenly trembled violently, and a strange purple aura enveloped him, causing him to lose complete control. The mage was utterly panicked, sweating profusely as he realized his body was inexplicably paralyzed. The colossal Swamp Mammoth suddenly froze, its eyes glowing with an eerie purple light, signaling that its control had been stolen. The monster's eyes flashed with a deadly light, completely dominated by some invisible, overwhelming force. The Red Orc soldiers below looked at each other in confusion, not yet understanding what was happening as the atmosphere suddenly turned eerie. The mammoth frantically turned and trampled its own allies, crushing the Orc soldiers into a paste amidst their desperate screams. Yakuzan stood frozen on high ground, gripping his battle axe tightly as he watched his legion being turned against itself by its own heavy weapon. Yakuzan was utterly panicked, shouting questions at his subordinates as he saw his troops inexplicably attacked by their own allies. Chris Moonlight stood frozen from afar, witnessing the colossal purple energy tearing through the sky and engulfing the battlefield. The seventh prince broke out in a cold sweat, completely speechless before the destructive power that had just erupted before his eyes. Shutra's hand trembled as he gripped the hammer's handle, feeling the dark energy wildly surging as if to shatter everything. He gritted his teeth and exerted all his strength, yanking the hammer from the forging stand amidst a crackling forest of purple lightning. Shutra let out a satisfied sigh, kneeling on the floor while the dark aura from the hammer still violently swirled around him. The hammer revealed its true form, a rough, pitch-black metal mass, cracked with streams of dazzling, menacing purple energy. Shutra turned his head in bewilderment as he heard the explanation of the origin of the overwhelming weapon in his hand. named Thunder Hammer. Felicia Doomblade, though exhausted, still struggled to stand, leaning on Sarah, her sharp gaze confirming that Enkidu had chosen him as its new master. The gamer pointed at his face, sweating profusely and stammering, unable to believe he had just stumbled upon such a sweet destiny. Felicia coldly ordered them to use lethal force immediately, making Shutra break out in a cold sweat, while Carrick and Sarah behind him were no less tense. The hammer in Shutra's hand began to shake violently, emitting a dazzling purple aura, signaling a destructive power that had just awakened. Enkidu's mana flowed directly into Shutra's brain, automatically updating the instructions for using this legendary weapon. In his mind, the true nature of the power appeared. It was conquest, to subdue and crush all opponents. Absolute domination was the core key to wielding this thunder-generating anvil. Shutra swung the hammer high, his eyes blazing with confidence as the dark energy enveloped his body. He flashed a sly, challenging smile, immediately deciding to use the Swamp Mammoth boss as a test subject for his domination skill. A colossal purple pillar of light shot straight from the hammer to the ground, creating terrifying pressure that shook the entire battlefield. The colossal monster was instantly mind-controlled, its eyes glowing purple in obedience, raising its leg according to its new master's will. The Swamp Mammoth's 1,000-ton stomp created a terrifying explosion, wiping out a section of Red Orc soldiers amidst their desperate screams. The Red Orc soldiers screamed desperately as they were suddenly attacked, not understanding why their colossal ally had turned against them. Two soldiers looked up, their faces drained of blood, realizing death was descending upon them. The Swamp Mammoth's colossal foot utterly crushed the enemy formation, pulverizing the soldiers into a paste in an instant. An allied warrior smirked triumphantly under the blazing red fire, realizing that the prince and princess had spectacularly turned the tide. The allied Orc Legion roared into battle, charging like a storm to sweep away the remaining enemies, leaving none to escape. The battlefield turned into a slaughterhouse as our sides swung axes, brutally decapitating the lizardmen and Red Orcs. The clanging of metal was deafening. The weak enemy soldiers were completely overwhelmed by our army's surging momentum. Yakuzan stood frozen on the cliff, sweating profusely, as he heard the desperate screams echoing from the sea of fire below. He turned and roared at his subordinate, demanding an explanation for the boss's insane actions, but the man could only tremble in fear of that colossal mana. Realizing the situation was dire, the cowardly great chieftain gritted his teeth and ordered an immediate retreat, shocking his subordinates. A shocking explosion hurled earth and rocks into the sky, startling the Red Orc soldiers and signaling the appearance of a true monster. Chris Moonlight descended onto the battlefield like a god, creating immense pressure that crushed the enemy's morale the moment he landed. The seventh prince smirked arrogantly, his sharp eyes looking down at his prey and delivering a death sentence to his opponent. Yakuzan was furious to the point of bursting when his opponent advised him to surrender for a quick death. He stammered curses in utter humiliation. The great chieftain let out a savage roar, swinging his weapon, intending to tear the arrogant foe in front of him to shreds, but his opponent remained unfazed. Chris Moonlight's eyes flashed with a deadly blue light, focusing all his killing intent into the decisive blow to send his enemy to oblivion. He unleashed Beast Godfist at light speed, sending streaks of blue energy claws tearing through space and straight towards his opponent's neck. Yakuzan's head hit the ground with a thud, to the astonishment of his subordinates, ending the chieftain's life in a single move. The Red Orc mages screamed, announcing that the great chieftain was gone, and the whole group, terrified, turned and fled for their meager lives. Chris Moonlight calmly dusted his hands, watching the fleeing remnants of the army, letting out a sigh of relief, and preparing to clean up the remaining small fry. Chris Moonlight secretly admitted that if it weren't for those two carrying the team, his side would have been in big trouble. The seventh prince stood proudly amidst the desolate battlefield, looking up and wondering about Shutra's situation. The magic screen displayed terrifying explosions as the herd of mammoths swept through and crushed the enemy troops like ants. Carrick pointed at the screen, confirming it was a real-time feed, while Felicia and Sierra were stunned by the monster's overwhelming power. Felicia broke out in a cold sweat, explaining that thanks to the power of the anvil, Shutra could completely control these colossal guardians. The sixth princess's lips trembled as she painstakingly uttered the confirmation that the Red Thunder tribe had been completely defeated. No sooner had she finished speaking than Felicia stumbled and collapsed from depleted mana, causing Sarah to rush over in a panic to support her master. Sierra anxiously screamed her sister's name, but Felicia awkwardly reassured her that she just needed a little rest to be fine again. Carrick and Chris Moonlight's group was about to find a safe place for Felicia to recover when they suddenly paused, full of doubt. They looked into the dark corridor ahead and called out Shutra's name, unsure of what awaited them in the shadows. Shutra let out a sigh of relief after carrying the team on his back, while the system continuously spammed level-up notifications, pleasing his ears. He stared wide-eyed at the soaring stats, wondering if his conquest skill also benefited from controlling Enkidu's artifact. Shutra curiously touched the interface screen, which was emitting dazzling golden lights, signaling newly updated powers. Not just one, but a series of skills had leveled up. Under the king's banner had also quietly climbed to level 2 without him noticing. He smirked, realizing that his auxiliary skills also progressed alongside conquest. Truly a windfall that made him visibly stronger. Shutra's gaze stopped at the brand new skill named Knights of the King. Just hearing the name, he could already smell the strong scent of summoning subordinates, exactly to his liking. While engrossed in his new power, Shutra was startled, his eyes widening as he heard a desperate cry nearby. From the bushes, 8th Princess Caitlyn emerged with a worried and bewildered expression, making Shutra stare blankly and call her name. He scratched his head and gave an awkward, innocent smile, about to explain why he had quietly left without a word to his teammates. Before he could finish his apology, Caitlyn delivered a devastating head knock that twisted his face in excruciating pain. 8th Princess Caitlyn poked Shutra's forehead and scolded him relentlessly for disappearing without a trace, making him sweat profusely and mumble apologies. Although they were safe, the retreat plan was postponed, and Caitlyn decided the whole group had to camp overnight in this forest. She turned back to look at Shutra with a serious gaze, announcing that they were facing a significant problem. Shutra looked bewildered with an innocent expression, unable to process the information quickly, so he had to ask what the hell the problem was. It turned out that 6th Princess Felicia had completely shut down, lying motionless on the bed with a pale face due to exhaustion. Shutra and Caitlyn entered the ruins, observing the dark elves using healing magic. Felicia had been pushed beyond her limits after being kidnapped by the Red Orcs. Caitlyn frowned worriedly, admitting that even after resting, her sister was still in a deep coma and they didn't know when she would wake up. She gave a wry smile and explained that without Felicia, they couldn't summon the phantom steed to travel, so the whole group was stuck here, keeping watch. Shutra nodded, confirming he understood the problem. His eyes clouded with worry for the 6th princess's critical condition. The silent night fell, enveloping the mountain ranges and the forest, signaling a long, arduous night awaiting the group. While Carrack slept soundly as if dead, Shutra sat with his knees drawn up in a corner, arms crossed, looking bored as he watched his comrades rest. He leaned against a stone pillar with a world-weary expression, not knowing what to do to kill time in this silent space. Suddenly, Shutra realized he was completely awake. Perhaps leveling up had helped him fully recover his physical and mental state. He looked up at the dark ceiling with a sigh, wondering if he really had to sit and count sheep until dawn. A huge exclamation mark appeared in his head as he suddenly came up with a brilliant idea to utilize this dead time. He stared at the wooden door ahead. His gamer instincts told him that this ancient ruin definitely had a hidden armory or treasure vault. Of course, along with delicious rewards, there were always dozens of deadly traps and annoying guardian monsters waiting in the shadows. But Shutra smirked confidently as he held the dark energy mass, because now he was the legitimate owner of these ruins. He summoned a dazzling purple energy hammer, gripping absolute power in his hand to prepare to plunder resources. The formidable power of this divine anvil lay in the fact that it allowed its owner to manipulate everything and impose the rules within the ruins' territory. Shutra grinned triumphantly as he gripped the glowing purple energy hammer in his hand, confidently asserting that he now had a free pass to rule these ruins. Meanwhile, Carrack was still sprawled on the cold stone floor, snoring loudly as if he had never slept, oblivious to the world around him. Shutra shook him repeatedly, startling the orc awake. He looked dazed, not understanding what was happening when he heard his master call his name. He squatted down in front of the bodyguard, flashing a meaningful smile and enticing Carrack to follow him to some interesting place. The blazing yellow torchlight on the stone walls illuminated the deep, winding path inside the ruins, guiding the two conspirators who were plotting to plunder treasures. Carrack walked, fretting about potential traps, but Shutra immediately reassured him with the formidable title of Master of the Ruins to silence the timid orc. Shutra pushed open the large door with an excited expression, explaining to his subordinate that if it was an ancient ruin, there had to be a cool hidden armory. Carrack's eyes widened, and his jaw dropped in astonishment, making him sweat profusely when he saw the gigantic creature lying inside the dark room. Before them lay a colossal metal monster, causing Carrack to frantically shout a warning to the prince about the presence of the massive danger. Shutra calmly explained that it was an arc golem in griffin form, then concluded with a simple statement for the orc to easily grasp. This is an extremely powerful guy. Carrack sweated profusely when he heard Shutra tease that if they had come through the main route, they would have all been wiped out ages ago, making the orc hastily tell his master to stop speaking ill omens. Seeing his large but timid subordinate hiding behind the arc golem, Shutra scoffed in disdain, but Carrick stubbornly argued that he was just being cautious. The heavy stone door slowly opened with a loud sound, revealing the entrance to a secret area inside the ruins. Carrick shouted with joy upon finding the treasure. Before them was an enormous fortune of gold, silver, jewels, and weapons piled everywhere. The orc's eyes gleamed brightly as he excitedly held up a gleaming silver breastplate and showed Shutra, claiming it was definitely a high-quality item. Shutra narrowed his eyes, activating his observation skill. He noticed the subtle magical energy flowing within the armor and confirmed it was genuine magical equipment. Hearing the prince generously ask if he wanted it, Carrick was so stunned that he stammered, unable to believe his ears that he was actually allowed to possess this valuable item. Shutra chuckled and said that the armor was too big for him, so Carrick should just take it. This moved Carrick to tears, and he profusely thanked his generous master. After settling the reward for his subordinate, Shutra turned to the nearby table and was attracted by the sparkling light emanating from the gold coins. He picked up an ancient gold coin engraved with a dragon, made a preliminary assessment of its value, then quickly stuffed all useful items into his spatial inventory. Shutra generously ordered Carrick to plunder anything valuable in the room for himself. Suddenly, his eyes caught an unusually sparkling wooden chest in the corner of the room, making him exclaim in surprise. Without hesitation, he knelt before the strange chest and reached out to open the lid with a dry click, echoing in the silent space. Just as the chest lid opened, a loud noise echoed from behind, startling Shutra as he realized he had accidentally activated a secret mechanism. The stone wall behind the chest slowly slid aside with a rumbling sound, revealing a dark, dusty passageway that left him astonished. He stared at the pitch-black void that had just appeared, muttering guesses about a secret space hidden within. His gamer blood surged. Shutra's eyes shone brightly like headlights, with the strong conviction that it definitely contained ultimate treasures. He cautiously took steady steps into the strange space that was beginning to emit an enchanting purple light. After passing through the long corridor, a vast hall opened before him, with a blazing purple flame burning on a majestic central stone pedestal. Shutra's sharp gaze immediately locked onto the most important target present in the room, and he softly exclaimed upon finding what he needed. Shutra stared in awe at the object floating amidst the enchanting purple aura, and mumbled, confirming the target before him. Looking closely at the rough, fiery stone shell, he immediately recognized this familiar mana flow, even though he was seeing it for the first time. The legendary name automatically popped into his head like an unconditional reflex of a professional. Enkidu. He looked up at the treasure with extreme longing and called its full name, Enkidu's Gauntlet. The divine weapon, bearing the title of Earthshaker, was radiating overwhelming power, making the surrounding space tremble. Shutra stood opposite the stone pedestal, clearly feeling the powerful and inviting resonance from this boss-tier equipment. His eyes lit up with excitement as he realized this was the perfect piece for his Aura and Conquest Knight class. As if hypnotized by the call of absolute power, he took decisive steps towards the stone pedestal to claim it. His finger had just lightly touched the cracked surface of the gauntlet to establish ownership when a surge of purple electricity flashed. Shutra panicked as the system poured cold water on him with a series of red notifications stating that he was too weak and lacked all the stats to use this hot item. Shutra sweated profusely, his face falling, thinking he wasn't skilled enough to touch this hot item and was about to be flatly rejected. Surprisingly, the gauntlet glowed brightly, accompanied by a low hum, and a majestic voice rang out, granting him permission to use it. A dazzling golden notification from the system appeared, confirming that the Earthshaker had officially recognized him as its new master, leaving him dumbfounded. The system immediately updated the ownership to Shutra's name as the divine weapon shot from the stone pedestal to physically connect with him. He swung his arm to receive the surging power, his eyes burning with determination to conquer this heavy-duty toy. A fierce burst of energy enveloped Shutra's body as the metal gauntlet clung tightly and locked onto his left arm. His blazing red eyes flashed sharply, feeling the surging flow of power merging with his body. He stared at the armored arm in disbelief as his strength, mana, and stamina stats all instantly surged by 10 points. Shutra groaned in delight, exclaiming in astonishment that simply by wearing it, his previously pathetic stats had been buffed to a new level. An ambitious and arrogant smile spread across his lips as he imagined the unparalleled dominance he would wield once his true level increased. Shutra watched the divine weapon, Enkidu, gradually dissolve into specks of light, then praised its wondrous magic. He glanced at the item's stat window that had just appeared, thrilled because this item was much better than he had anticipated. Just as he was feeling smug, Karak suddenly appeared behind him, asking questions that made him jump and turn around, staring. Caught red-handed, he broke out in a cold sweat and stammered, asking how long this hulking bodyguard had been lurking there. Karak didn't beat around the bush, stating plainly that he had seen everything from the moment the prince made the gauntlet disappear. He grimaced, admitting the truth, his mind racing with worry that if his overpowered inventory skill was exposed, it would cause huge trouble. The old orc scratched his chin anxiously, warning that if this strange incident got out, big trouble would befall his master. Karak pounded his chest, swearing an oath, asserting that he would take this secret to his grave unless a knife was held to his throat. Seeing the absolute loyalty of his trusted subordinate, he breathed a sigh of relief and followed the suggestion to withdraw their troops to base. He gave a meaningful smile, agreeing that this gloomy, cold place held no charm, so a quick escape was the best course of action. Shutra strode confidently out of the treasure chamber with Karak silently following behind him like a diligent bodyguard. His red eyes suddenly widened, spotting an extremely important hot item hidden among the pile of gold. He stopped abruptly, then spun around to call out to the bewildered old orc behind him. Karak stared around with a bewildered expression, not understanding what his master was hinting at amidst all this treasure. He pointed directly at a dark corner, firmly stating that it was the crucial item their entire team desperately needed. The high-grade recovery potion was poured directly into Princess Felicia's mouth to restore her rapidly depleting health bar. Blinding, healing light erupted as he, Caitlyn, and Sira focused on rapidly restoring the unconscious princess. With the immediate health buff, Felicia's reddish-pink eyes slowly opened, and her vitality began to return. He supported her shoulder, offering a reassuring smile, then gently asked if her health had stabilized. Felicia looked around blankly, not understanding what had happened, while Caitlyn and he breathed a sigh of relief for having saved her from the brink of death. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears, overwhelmed with emotion at the sight of the high-grade mana recovery potion appearing at such a critical moment. Felicia clutched her head in confusion, not understanding where such a high-quality item could have come from in this desolate place. Shutra spread his hands, reminding the princess to recall whose land they were standing on. Only then did Princess Felicia realize, understanding that she was right within the ancient ruins. He smirked confidently, giving a thumbs up, asserting that as the master of the ruins, he had no shortage of excellent items to use. Shutra gently advised the princess to rest and recover her strength until her mana bar was fully restored. His gaze wavered slightly upon hearing his name called out with deep affection. Felicia blushed crimson, shyly expressing her sincere gratitude to her savior. Dawn broke over the canyon, illuminating the encampment where the soldiers were anxiously waiting. A Red Orc soldier joyfully yelled at the top of his lungs, announcing the good news as he saw the leader's safe return. Bandel laughed heartily, enthusiastically welcoming and praising the glorious achievements of the princes and princesses the moment they appeared. The celebration didn't last long before an awkward cough echoed, making Shutra and Felicia turn their heads to look with curiosity. Chris appeared with a tense expression, awkwardly covering his mouth and clearing his throat a few times to attract everyone's attention. The seventh prince, usually so fierce and bold, was now suddenly stammering, hesitant, and unable to utter a word, like a chicken with a hairball. He blushed crimson, turning away in embarrassment, and softly mumbling praise for Princess Felicia's excellent performance. Felicia immediately tossed her hair proudly, crossed her arms over her chest, and haughtily declared that such trivial matters were nothing to her. Shutra, standing beside her, glanced at the princess's excessive smugness and could only sneer inwardly at her lightning-fast change of attitude. Chris quickly regained his commanding demeanor, ordering everyone to rest and recuperate while he and the army handled the remaining cleanup. He asserted that remnants of the Red Thunder tribe were still lurking and vowed to wipe them out within half a month at most. Upon hearing this, Shutra's mind raced, gleefully realizing he was about to enjoy 2 full weeks of free relaxation while his younger brother worked tirelessly. Caitlyn leaned close to Shutra's ear and whispered, bluntly shattering his budding dream of a vacation with a harsh statement. Shutra's eyes widened, his face flushed, and he stammered incoherently at the thunderous news he had just received. The 8th princess flashed a radiant yet murderous smile, gently informing him that they still had a mountain of tasks to resolve. The majestic mountain forest appeared under the sunlight, soon to become a hellish training ground for Shutra's tragic days. Before he could even recover, Shutra was blown away by an invisible surge of power, his face darkening in surprise. The air shrieked as a powerful punch was unleashed, proving a formidable level of strength. Caitlyn adopted an extremely fierce combat stance, sternly warning Shutra to concentrate fully if he didn't want to taste suffering. Shutra lay sprawled on the floor, his whole body convulsing and groaning in pain, while the demonic princess urged him to get up immediately. He grimaced, complaining to the heavens and earth, admitting that despite mentally preparing himself, This beast god fist training was truly too brutal. It turned out that the important matter Caitlyn had mentioned was indeed the hellish training to impart the beast god fist to him. The first 5 days passed in tears, as Shutra served as nothing more than a mobile punching bag for the princess to relentlessly batter in the desolate mountains. It took him a whole week of being beaten instead of eating before he finally began to discern the trajectories of the 8th princess's deathly, destructive punches. Time flew by, and the 11th day of the hellish training officially began with aftershocks that shook a corner of the forest. No longer a helpless punching bag, Shutra now gracefully dodged Caitlyn's wind-splitting kicks with spectacular agility. Caitlyn smirked with interest as she unleashed her moves. "Now you're finally keeping up with my speed, aren't you?" Shutra wiped his sweat, giving the confident smile of someone who had just escaped death's door. "After so many brutal beatings, I had to get smarter, didn't I?" As night fell, the fruits of his labor became clear. Both his beast god fist and aura had smoothly reached level 5. Caitlyn wiped the sweat from her brow, contentedly announcing that he was now skilled enough to truly master the beast god fist. Hearing the good news, Shutra excitedly clenched his fists, while the princess also had to admit she had never seen anyone level up at such an insane speed as him. Shutra's eyes blazed with ambition as he thought of soon wielding the wolf tribe's secret ultimate technique, the beast god fist. Caitlyn proactively took Shutra's hand in the night forest, declaring that she would unlock a completely new method of aura manipulation for him, leaving him stunned. The 8th princess squeezed his hand with a powerful smile, demanding that her younger brother concentrate fully and not miss any fluctuations. Shutra immediately responded, with eyes burning with determination, affirming his readiness to receive the faction's secret technique. The moment the two streams of power touched, a brilliant blue energy began to erupt from their clasped hands. Boom! A colossal pillar of aura shot straight into the sky, engulfing both of them in a storm of wild and pure energy. Shutra closed his eyes and relaxed, allowing Caitlyn's overwhelming aura to penetrate and guide his body into a meditative state. The blue energy flowed like a sacred dragon, bringing a familiar sensation of beast god fist, yet it was infinitely more profound and transformative. The deeper he sank into the sea of energy, the more clearly Shutra felt the terrifying density and weight that true aura brought. Unconsciously, he realized that aura, when pushed to its limits, was not just life force, but also the power of the soul and the desire for conquest. Amidst the dazzling light of brutal domination, Shutra wondered if this was the true nature of the power that overwhelmed all things. A pillar of blue energy violently erupted from the ground, tearing through space and blowing away all surrounding obstacles. The system continuously displayed notifications right before Shutra, confirming that both Beast, Godfist, and Aura skills had successfully leveled up. Caitlyn couldn't hide her astonishment, her eyes wide as she uttered words of praise for his innate talent. Shutra stood proudly amidst the swirling energy, officially unlocking the overwhelming secret technique of Beast God Fist, Level 1. He stared at his glowing hand, feeling the perfect fusion between Beast God Fist and the power of Enkidu. Shutra clenched his fist, feeling the surge of physical and magical power coursing through every muscle fiber. The energy storm gradually subsided, leaving Shutra standing tall at the epicenter while Caitlyn observed from behind. He smirked confidently as the notification panel displayed a dazzling golden text confirming that the character had reached level 14. Shutra turned towards the shadows where Karak stood, boldly declaring that the real game was just beginning. Karak leaned against the tree, his sharp gaze fixed on his master, with an expression of absolute trust and loyalty. Dawn broke over the encampment, signaling a peaceful new day but also the beginning of the next strategic calculations. Shutra and Caitlyn sat enjoying breakfast in a rather relaxed atmosphere, but the gamer's mind was still racing. He seized the opportunity to probe for internal information, directly questioning about the 6th Princess Felicia to verify his suspicions. Caitlyn flinched when Shutra inquired about the strained relationship between Felicia and Chris Moonlight. Shutra's mind was churning. He had to win Felicia over to his side, just like Chris. But the underlying conflict between them was a deadly variable. Caitlyn hesitated, explaining that the two weren't exactly sworn enemies, but there was an invisible distance that kept them apart. She asserted that there had been no direct friction or specific incidents between them. Things had simply grown cold over time. Caitlyn speculated that the deeper reason lay in the relationship between Chris and Sylvan, a name that made Shutra's eyes widen in surprise the moment it was uttered. The 8th princess sternly reminded him to be careful with his words when mentioning the other, causing Shutra to break out in a cold sweat and hastily cover up his blunder. Memories flooded back, and Shutra recalled Sylvan Doomblade, Felicia's twin brother, who had been an extremely annoying thorn in his side when he played on his Zephyr Ragnaros account. Shutra was about to delve deeper into the conflict between Chris and Sylvan when the conversation was abruptly cut short. Chris Moonlight suddenly appeared like a god, making Caitlyn jump as her older brother arrived unannounced. The seventh prince casually sat down at the table to join the meal, wondering why everyone was gathered so early while his younger sister was still stammering in shock. He gave a confident thumbs up, ordering everyone to pack their bags immediately, because the campaign had ended earlier than expected. Shutra, bewildered and not understanding what was happening, hastily asked where the group was rushing off to. Chris scoffed as if it were obvious, declaring that once the mission was complete, they had to return and report the results immediately. Before withdrawing, Bandal approached Shutra and shook his hand respectfully, while Chris praised the efforts of the princes and princesses. The Ogre General looked Shutra directly in the eyes with admiration, expressing his desire to reunite with the ninth prince on the battlefield someday. Shutra smiled back with spirit, confidently affirming that he too would await the day of reunion with Bandal. The two princes turned and walked away decisively, officially concluding the campaign in the Orc lands and heading towards their next objective. Chris Moonlight smiled confidently, rallying his siblings to brace themselves and head straight for the Demon King's castle. The towering castle appeared under a blood-red sky, exuding a terrifying killing intent and majesty that made the faint-hearted tremble. Inside the silent grand hall, heavy footsteps echoed like sledgehammers, signaling the presence of the supreme monarch. The Demon King sat motionless on the throne, a mass of pitch-black armor exuding terrifying pressure that enveloped all things in darkness. The army moved swiftly through the forest with the help of spirit wolves, skipping all rest stops to save maximum time. Their goal was to activate a long-range spatial teleportation array to instantly transport them directly to the capital. Despite using powerful support, Shutra, along with Felicia and Caitlyn, still had to endure 3 grueling days, camping in the wilderness instead of sleeping in warm beds. Shutra sat idly, poking a stick into the campfire, admitting that he was quite nervous, thinking about having to face the monster's lair tomorrow. He used a stick to draw the names of the 3 most formidable powers vying for control of the castle: Zephyr, Baikal, and Anastasia. The 3 great mountains blocking Shutra's path officially appeared in his mind: the cruel second prince Zephyr, the mighty first prince Baikal, and the cunning fourth princess Anastasia. A brutal war for the throne, where fists spoke louder than rank. Whoever accumulated more achievements would rule over all. The 2 monsters, Baikal and Zephyr, possessed dragon blood flowing through their veins, so their powers were almost equal. Shutra fully understood that if he had to choose a less terrible successor, the eldest brother Baikal, with his gentle nature, would be the most reasonable choice. But all calculations were meaningless because after that fateful day, the world order would be completely overturned beneath the heel of the victor. He smirked calculatingly, determined to prepare everything perfectly to turn the tables in the upcoming life-or-death game. The ultimate goal now was to grind levels frantically so his body could withstand the destructive power of the potent artifact, Enkidu. Shutra decided to fully utilize his new power by immediately activating the overwhelming skill he had just acquired: King's Knight. A crisp notification sound rang out, the system confirming that the skill had been successfully activated and the King's Knights were officially formed. The skill panel appeared with a host of amazing features, from HP buffs and training to summoning commanders, making anyone who saw it drool with envy. Shutra's jaw dropped in astonishment as he realized this wasn't just a skill to summon small fry, but an incredibly overpowered, game-breaking guild system. Shutra smirked calculatingly as he realized the terrifying potential of his new skill right from the first level, his eyes gleaming as he spotted the ideal test subject standing right in front of him. Karak roared in indignation, grumbling at his prince for not getting into bed yet, to rest up for tomorrow morning's march. Ignoring his subordinates' complaints, Shutra squatted down and waved Karak closer with a gleeful expression, as if head just struck gold, his mouth curving into a mysterious chuckle. He flashed a radiant smile, accompanied by sparkling, deceptive eyes, gently coaxing Karak to participate in a small, interesting experiment. Karak flinched, breaking out in a cold sweat, his survival instincts telling him something ominous was afoot, causing him to stammer his question with an expression full of suspicion and confusion. Under the quiet moonlight, Shutra began his elaborate act by solemnly calling out the name of the mighty orc warrior, preparing to unleash his skill. A brilliantly glowing sword suddenly appeared in midair, radiating a dazzling aura, signaling the official start of the system ritual. Shutra solemnly placed the sword on Karak's kneeling shoulder, boldly declaring this green orc officially knighted as his own. A torrent of energy from the system surged and enveloped Karak's body, making him gape in surprise at the strange, surging power. Karak distinctly felt the change in every muscle fiber, uttering in astonishment about the strange yet powerful sensation the prince had just bestowed upon him. Karak groaned with pleasure as he felt his loyalty surge, the title of level 24 Knight Commander shining brightly, proving he had successfully received a dirty buff. Shutra smirked as if he'd won the lottery, his face radiating extreme satisfaction upon seeing his experimental subject operating more smoothly than expected. The green orc stared in bewilderment at his hand, which was steaming with power. Before he could understand what was happening, Shutra patted his shoulder to begin the high-level brainwashing. With eyes sparkling like stars, Shutra unleashed his sweet persuasion, painting a vision of becoming the strongest orc in the world, to trick Karak into dedicating his life to him. He muttered, calculating item builds to turn Karak into an orc emperor capable of taking on the entire dragon race, leaving his poor subordinate frozen, listening to his boss's empty promises. The silent night sky bore witness to the insane monologue, making listeners wonder if this prince had lost his mind, or was simply high on power. The ancient, towering spire stood majestically amidst the old forest, appearing in the daylight, marking the rendezvous point for the next journey. The entire monster party gathered before the magic circle, preparing to activate the teleportation gate to leave this desolate forest. Chris Moonlight, with his bulging muscles, turned to ask Shutra for his opinion, a confident smile signaling it was time to begin a new journey. Shutra responded with a resolute gaze full of leadership charisma, ready to step into the bigger game that awaited them. A decisive step firmly pressed onto the magic circle, officially activating the spatial teleportation mechanism. The entire monster party stood proudly amidst the brilliant blue light, ready to leave the old forest after days of arduous grinding. Shutra's eyes suddenly widened in astonishment as he felt an unusual surge of pressure engulfing him from all sides. A colossal pillar of energy shot straight up into the sky, tearing through the night and sweeping the entire group into the spatial current. The terrifying speed of movement made Shutra lose control. He flailed helplessly amidst the chaotic tunnel of light. His face drained of color, Shutra frantically screamed in vain as he realized the speed was too fast. Wait! He fell freely through the undefined space, his desperate scream echoing throughout the teleportation tunnel. Upon landing, Shutra collapsed onto the floor with a dazed expression, while Chris and his subordinates behind him stood firm as bedrock. Caitlyn bent down worriedly to ask, "Are you all right, Shutra?" He, sweating profusely, awkwardly replied, "Yeah, I'm fine." Before he could fully recover, a loud call rang out. "Felicia!" making both Shutra and Caitlyn stare blankly towards the sixth princess, who stood with her back to them, full of mystery. As soon as Felicia appeared, she was surrounded by her dark elf subordinates, who showered her with praise, leaving Shutra standing bewildered like an outsider. The dark elf sisters huddled together, whispering amongst themselves, creating a boisterous atmosphere no different from a bustling marketplace right in front of Shutra. Shutra broke out in a cold sweat, secretly comparing this scene to the fervent idol fan clubs he had seen, feeling utterly out of place. On the other side, Chris Moonlight and Caitlyn Moonlight were also warmly welcomed by their wolf soldiers and orc soldiers, like A-list celebrities returning home. Shutra gave a wry smile as he realized the harsh truth. No one cared about him. He was completely sidelined in this welcoming ceremony. Just as he was feeling sorry for himself, Karak lumbered up from behind, the loyal orc's colossal shadow completely covering Shutra, affirming their mutual presence. Seeing the clearly divided factions from above was enough to understand Shutra's pathetic standing in the Demon King's castle. Only Karak was his sole support. Yet, Shutra smirked arrogantly, for this scenario of being shunned like an outcast was entirely part of his calculations. He turned to look directly into the loyal bodyguard's eyes and asked a loaded question. "Are you ready, Karak?" With eyes burning with determination, Shutra declared that he would begin the journey to turn the tables and change everything from this very moment. The dilapidated tower, designated as Shutra's residence, stood tall against the crimson sky, looking as desolate as an abandoned haunted house. The ceiling inside was covered in thick cobwebs, proving that this place had been forgotten for ages, with no one bothering to look after it. Clutter was strewn everywhere, dust thickly covered wooden crates and rusty old swords, the suffocating space more akin to a junk storage than a prince's chamber. Karak looked around with a sigh, telling them to unload the items here, while Shutra plopped down onto the shabby bed, forcing a bitter smile and comforting himself that at least he had a place to sleep. Shutra announced that the schedule would only begin tomorrow, so he was free for now. But deep down, he knew that freedom here was no different from being cast aside to rot. A sudden knock at the door interrupted his negative thoughts, making Shutra jump and turn around with a bewildered expression. A neatly dressed female office worker entered, introducing herself as Flora Sevensword from the Demon King's Castle's Real Estate Management Bureau. Shutra wondered why a high-ranking official would come to this rat hole, to which Flora calmly explained that his merit points had significantly increased. Shutra's eyes widened to their fullest when he heard the shocking news that he was eligible to ditch this dilapidated place and choose a fancier new mansion. A knowledgeable, bespectacled female staff member named Isabella from the merit office appeared and formally introduced herself with a professional demeanor. Shutra, standing from above, questioned the house exchange, while Isabella revealed her true form with a colossal snake lower body, calmly confirming the information was perfectly accurate. The Lamia snapped her fingers, opening a system interface displaying achievements, making Shutra's eyes and mouth form an O in sheer excitement. The golden achievement board shone brightly with merit level 5, and a monthly salary that had skyrocketed 100-fold to 500 gold, thanks to the feat of wiping out the Red Thunder tribe. Isabella spared no praise, extolling Shutra as the first prince to set such a formidable record on his very first mission, making him force a humble smile for propriety. Without another second of hesitation, Shutra demanded to see his new den immediately to escape this slum as soon as possible. Karek's jaw dropped, sweat pouring off him like a shower, and he stammered his master's name, utterly shocked by the magnificent sight before his eyes. Before the master and disciple stood a colossal mansion, with a dazzling golden gate under the moonlight, a world apart in class from the pigsty they had just left. Sarah unexpectedly appeared in a neat butler's uniform and bowed in welcome, making the green orc's face go blank as he couldn't comprehend what was happening. Flora Sevensword, in a perfect maid's uniform, bowed her head in greeting, declaring that from now on, she would wholeheartedly serve her new master as both housekeeper and head maid. Karak scratched his head, not understanding why a real estate agent had turned into a maid. But Shutra nonchalantly replied that he had used his merit points to recruit this talent to his team. Shutra casually explained the concept of currency accumulated from achievements, which sounded like gibberish to the orc, who could only lament that lately, the prince had been speaking nothing but incomprehensible things. The next day, the setting sun's light bathed the towering spire, signaling an important event about to take place at Shutra's new mansion. Karak, in a dashing suit but with a grimace of tension so severe he needed to relieve himself, made Shutra exasperatedly tell his subordinate to go take care of his business immediately, to avoid being an eyesore. Shutra held a wine glass, but cold sweat also began to pour from him. He admitted that he himself was catching the damned nervousness from that burly subordinate. While halfway through a sip of wine to calm his nerves, Shutra startled and nearly choked upon hearing a sweet voice praising the dashing appearance of both master and disciple. Felicia Doomblade and Caitlyn Moonlight emerged like two goddesses in splendid evening gowns. Caitlyn lavishly praised her elder sister's impeccable aesthetic taste in choosing outfits for the group. The sixth princess gently stroked her white hair, flashing a self-satisfied and charming smile upon seeing that her elaborate efforts in preparing the outfits had yielded excellent visual results. Caitlyn Moonlight completely shed her usual cool, big sister demeanor, blushing furiously as she praised Shutra for looking absolutely stunning in his outfit. Shutra awkwardly scratched his cheek at the barrage of compliments, but quickly reciprocated, flattering them that both sisters looked exceptionally beautiful today. Caitlyn Moonlight's eyes crinkled in delight, while Felicia Doomblade activated her tsundere mode, turning away with a blush, verbally complaining but secretly overjoyed. Chris Moonlight lumbered in like a sturdy mountain, reminding his younger brother that this was his first and extremely important debut ceremony in his career as a prince. The seventh prince clenched his fist with great vigor, firmly asserting that today, Shutra was the MVP, and had to show his true mettle to the entire Demon King's castle. Shutra responded with a resolute gaze and a confident smile, his mindset already primed and ready to tear up this political stage. The grand hall doors slowly creaked open, and Shutra stepped forward, thinking that many out there still considered his achievements to be mere luck. The demon nobles, of various monstrous forms from ox-headed to lizard-men, were gathered in full force, their eyes full of scrutiny and suspicion directed at the newcomer. Amidst the storm of judgmental gazes, Shutra secretly vowed to make this entire crowd gape in awe and immediately acknowledge his overwhelming power. Shutra led the procession in with great poise, followed by his muscular older brother, Chris Moonlight, and his two stunning older sisters, Felicia Doomblade and Caitlyn Moonlight. The group stood proudly before the towering throne, disregarding the scrutinizing gazes of the nobles lined up on both sides. Chris Moonlight knelt on one knee with great dignity, and boldly declared himself the seventh prince before the supreme ruler. Seated majestically on the throne was the Demon King, the great ruler of the demon realm, whose oppressive aura made the very space feel thick and heavy. Demon King Mitra revealed a rugged, bearded face and piercing golden eyes like a predator, exuding the absolute authority of an emperor. Royal officials began to loudly report the achievements of the princes and princesses, while the Demon King silently observed with an unreadable expression. Shutra began to sweat profusely as he faced his father directly, who was known as the father of all the Demon King's children. He swallowed hard, filled with anxiety, suddenly realizing he had momentarily forgotten the true terror of this place. Standing before that colossal shadow radiating an overwhelming killing intent, Shutra truly understood that this was the final boss who could not be underestimated in this castle. Shutra collapsed to his knees on the floor, sweat pouring off him like rain, as his body couldn't withstand the terrifying pressure bearing down on him. The Demon King's killing intent materialized into a glowing red eye in the air, making him feel as if his bones were about to shatter into pieces. The light goddess appeared in his mind, issuing the command of conquest to awaken the trembling one. Shutra placed his hand over his left chest, feeling a surge of golden power rising powerfully from the depths of his soul. The Demon King still maintained his deep, terrifying expression, but his instincts told him that he, too, was a king. He tensed his body to avoid collapsing under that destructive gaze, forcing himself to overcome his fear. Shutra gritted his teeth, channeling all his iron will to subjugate this suffocating pressure beneath his feet. A dazzling aura erupted from Shutra's body, illuminating the entire great hall and pushing back the surrounding darkness. Shutra raised his head, his eyes burning with golden flames, his aura completely transformed by the power of conquest.